Chapter 1548. They knew that rushing forward would most likely result in death, but they had no other choice. General Mater obviously wanted to use them to consume the ammunition of the five-star army. The only thing they could do was to be a somewhat useful live target. Knowing that they would die, most of the Hindustanis simply threw away the weapons in their hands. To them, in the face of firearms, there was no difference whether they had weapons in their hands or not. Since that was the case, they might as well die in a relaxed manner. A total of 40,000 people walked forward step by step in a densely packed formation. Some soldiers even held hands with each other. It seemed that only by doing so would they not be so lonely on the road to the underworld after death. Even though the sky had already darkened, there were still people moving about in the vast and mighty army of 40,000 people. These were all human lives. Even though they were of a different race, many of the Cold Front warriors still couldn't bear to see this happen. Even Beta Persei and the others who were standing in the middle of the army seemed to have the same thought. Many of them even deliberately looked at Yang Qindong, who was riding on the white dragon. Perhaps they wanted their master to be merciful to their opponents. How could Yang Qindong not feel the gazes of these people intentionally or unintentionally looking at him? But his heart was like a boulder and did not waver in the slightest. He would never forget how the Hindustanis in the future rebelled against China. When you were needed, you could say anything. When you were not needed, you could be as cruel as possible. Looting, burning, and killing were all kinds of evil, but their country did not care. Instead, they allowed such things to happen. Because of this, many outstanding Chinese people suffered losses in this matter, and even lost their lives because of it. Since there was a chance now, of course he would not let these people live, let alone let history repeat itself. Give the order. Unless you kneel down and surrender, you are the enemy. You know how to treat the enemy. After Yang Qindong said this, no one dared to say anything else. Some smart ones had already run to the front to pass the order. In fact, there was no need to give any special orders. Since Yang Qindong did not give any new orders, they would just follow the same old routine. Therefore, before the messenger could cross the river and reach the front line, the five-star army had already opened fire. The vanguard of the 40,000 Hindustanis was already within 300 paces, and under the full force of their firepower, wave after wave of Indian soldiers fell to the ground. After being shot, some of the Hindustanis even had a look of relief on their faces. Perhaps this way they would no longer have any worries. The gunshots did not stop, and the casualties of the Hindustanis continued to increase. Under the heavy firepower of the Lung Feng soldiers, no one could get within 100 steps of them. Most of them were shot dead between 300 and 200 steps. This phenomenon continued until a quarter of an hour later, when the most elite cavalry of the two five-star army had already crossed the river. Then, without waiting for the formation to be completed, the two commanders, Tian Hu and Su He, commanded the cavalry to charge forward, one on the left and one on the right. The moment the cavalry charged, the Lung Feng soldiers stopped shooting. In just a short while, bullets had already fallen to the ground beneath their feet. Now that they no longer had to shoot, many of the soldiers began to massage their arms. It was obvious that shooting was a strenuous job, and it was very tiring to shoot for a long time. Charge. Those who drop their weapons and kneel down will live. Tens of thousands of the five-star army's elite cavalry charged, and the battle cry rang out everywhere. They shouted in the Hindustani language that they had just learned. In fact, it was just a Hindustani language to force the enemy to surrender, and it was not difficult to learn. Just a moment ago they were still facing firearms attacks, and suddenly the enemy changed tactics. Many of the Hindustanis widened their eyes, and they did not know what to do. It was true that infantry was at a disadvantage against cavalry, but it was not to say that they did not have a chance. But when they wanted to fight back, they found that the weapons in their hands had been thrown to the ground at some point. At this time, how could it be so easy to find them in the dark? Run. Seeing that the Han cavalry was getting closer, many of the Hindustanis' faces changed. To them, they would rather be killed by a flintlock. At least they would die a quick death. However, if they were hit by a warhorse, it was very likely that they would not die immediately. Instead, they would have to suffer a lot. This was not what they wanted. The tens of thousands of Hindustanis were all panicking, and the originally orderly formation became very chaotic. Everyone turned around and ran. It was as if whoever was a step slower would suffer the pain of being trampled by 10,000 horses. In such a chaotic environment, how many people would seriously listen to the five-star army's slogans to surrender? Due to the cavalry's charge, the battlefield became even more chaotic. This greatly exceeded the expectations of Grand General Matu Air behind him. He did not deny that the infantry was sent to exhaust the five-star army's ammunition. He had seen the firearms that his king bought from the west, and he knew that it required a lot of gunpowder to fire. Once there was no gunpowder, the gun was no different from an ordinary stick. He hated the fact that the 5-star army appeared and destroyed his artillery and firearms. Otherwise, he would not have to use manpower to exhaust bullets in exchange for a chance to win. However, who would have thought that the gunshots would stop? Just when he was thinking that the 5-star army's gunpowder was about to run out, he suddenly saw the black shadow rushing back. Not only that, the ground under his feet began to tremble. What's going on? After Matuer exclaimed, he instantly thought of a possibility. Then he said in shock, "Not good, the 5-star army's cavalry has already crossed the river. They are charging. Come, archers, where are the archers? Prepare to counterattack." As he shouted, Matuer's eyes revealed a hint of joy. Although the cavalry was not easy to deal with, it was still better than the untouchable firearms. Once the Han cavalry's momentum was restrained, perhaps his opportunity would come. For example, he could push the enemy back and then take the opportunity to lead his troops to charge. With the Han cavalry's cover, the 5-star army's firearms would not be able to fire casually. This would create an opportunity for him to rush to the river. This sudden turn of events had indeed caught many of the Indian generals off guard. But after hearing the great generals shout, many people calmed down from their panic. Then many of the soldiers picked up the bows on their backs and prepared to counterattack. In the dark, there was a limit to the accuracy of a bow and arrow. Unless it was a godly archer, the arrow that was shot out would most likely fly off to who knows where. Fortunately, they had enough soldiers. When the rain of arrows fell, even Meng Yi would be able to deal a heavy blow to the 5-star army's cavalry. It was a good idea, but they forgot one thing. That was, in front of the 5-star army's cavalry, there were still tens of thousands of their own troops. Even though they had been suppressed by Lung Feng for 15 minutes, there were still more than 30,000 people. This was not a small force. Because they did not want to be trampled to death by the cavalry, their retreat not only made it difficult for the archers to shoot, but also caused them to charge back into their own camp, causing even more damage. It was not a bad idea, but it had already become a reality. Under the pursuit of the cavalry, under the heavy sound of iron hooves, the Hindustanis desperately ran back. Even when they reached their own camp, they did not have any intention of stopping. Perhaps they did not want to be trampled to death, or perhaps they wanted to return to their own camp to seek reinforcements. But no matter what, they still charged back, causing damage to Matuer's defense and the archers' counterattack. It's a success. Everyone attack. Extend the cannons and bring out those mortars as well. With the help of the binoculars, Yang Qindong saw the Hindustanis frantically running back and his own cavalry chasing after them. Although he could only see a rough picture in the dark, with his many years of experience, he believed that it was a success. Soldiers were defeated like a landslide. This was the scene in front of him. Once the situation on the battlefield became irreversible, even if they wanted to, it would be impossible to reverse the situation. When Beta Persei heard that they were going to use the mortars, how could he remain calm? He immediately agreed, turned around and rode away. Not long after, the rumbling sound of cannons could be heard. This was not the self-made field artillery of the 5-star Army's military factory, but the sound of a 100mm mortar. In comparison, it could hit a distance of more than 10 miles and could kill people. The shells landed behind the Hindustani army, causing great damage and completely disrupted Matuer's previous arrangement. He always thought that a 6-mile bombardment was the limit of the 5-star army. He thought that the place where he was standing was very safe. But who would have thought that there would be such powerful cannons? Seeing that the rear of the army had also been hit by the cannons and was in chaos, he said with a sorrowful expression, "Retreat, retreat all the way back to Vidal City." The Hindustani army, who had been in a passive position, finally admitted defeat under the great power of the mortars and the 5-star army's trump card. Fortunately, Matuer was decisive in his actions. Under his decisive command, 100,000 of the 300,000-strong army managed to escape back into the city. And this battle had basically crushed the Hindustani army's will to resist. The sky was finally bright. At this time, under Yang Qindong's command, the army basically joined the battle. But because the Hindustani army was already in a mess and had no strength to resist, most people were just capturing captives. The battlefield was big enough, there were enough enemies, there was a language barrier and very few people cooperated. The capture of captives actually took 2 days and 1 night. It was not until noon on the 3rd day after the battle began that the battlefield basically stopped. Yang Qindong looked at the report that had just been sent to him. In this battle, they had killed more than 70,000 enemies and captured nearly 130,000 enemies. He knew that the Hindustanis were about to be finished. Chapter 1549. In Bidar city, General Mathur led the defeated army back to the city, and Nehru was shocked when he heard the news. That was 300,000 people, even 300,000 pigs couldn't be slaughtered so quickly, right? Although Mathur had brought back 100,000 people, it still made Nehru very angry. He had hoped that the 300,000 men would hold off the five-star army, and once the stalemate reached a certain point, he would look for an opportunity to counterattack. Now he had lost 2/3 of his soldiers, and with the soldiers in the city, there were only 25 men left. How long could they hold off the five-star army? Nehru was furious and the consequences were severe. In front of all the generals and ministers, he ordered Mathur to be executed. Mathur didn't resist at all. He had fought the five-star army twice in a row and had lost twice. He no longer had the confidence to win against the Hans. Since that was the case, so be it. Death was release. After Nehru killed Mater, he personally took command. He wanted to bring the 250,000 soldiers in the city to fight a decisive battle with the five-star army in Bidar city. This was also a national war. During this process, some people suggested that they should send people to negotiate with the five-star army. At most, they would surrender to the other party and respect the other party as their suzerain. There were also people who suggested that they should continue to retreat. They could retreat to Gabaja city. If that didn't work, they could retreat to Bangalore. Speaking of which, India's territory was not small. However, these 2 points were rejected by Nehru in the end. Surrendering was impossible. He understood that in front of the five-star army, there was only the possibility of annihilation. There was no such thing as peace in exchange for surrender. Since they were going to be annihilated no matter what, they might as well give it a try before they die. As for retreating, where would they retreat to the day after tomorrow? Doing so would only cause the morale of the army to drop, and they wouldn't have a chance to fight the final battle. To be able to become the king of Hindustan, Nehru wasn't a coward. On the contrary, he was someone with great ambition. He was determined to fight the five-star army. He wanted to see how strong the other party was. For this, the first thing Nehru did was to boost the morale of the army. He announced the wealth he had brought from the capital to the public and explained how much money and benefits one could get from killing an enemy on the battlefield. This kind of open and transparent reward system had indeed boosted morale and stirred up the hearts of the people. In just 2 days, the 250,000 Indian soldiers in the city seemed to have been reborn, and some of them even showed signs of longing for war. On the 5th day, Yang Chindong led the main force of the army and appeared outside Vidal city. When he learned that King Nehru did not escape, but was prepared to fight to the death with him here, he was naturally very happy. He liked to fight because it simplified complicated matters. It could buy him more time. And in order to fully respect this opponent, he was determined to show his ability, such as using the Air Force. He didn't try to understand the situation in the city. Although there were spies from the intelligence department in the city, they weren't equipped with radios and couldn't spread any news. And even without the support of intelligence, Yang Chindong could imagine that since Nehru didn't intend to leave, he must have made ample preparations and was waiting for Yang Chindong to attack the city. Since that was the case, let's see who's more powerful. On the first day outside the city, the Air Force couldn't take off due to the heavy rain. Yang Chindong endured for an entire day, which further boosted the morale of King Nehru. He shouted arrogantly that the five-star army wasn't invincible, and they were probably afraid of his army. This boosted the morale of the 250,000 soldiers in the city by a large margin. In such a situation, without the support of advanced weapons, it was really impossible for the 200,000 soldiers of the five-star army to take down Pidal city. In ancient times, the existence of a strong city would often deter the enemy. Sometimes, in order to take over a city, it was possible for the enemy to surround it for a few months, half a year, or even longer. That was also why the wise monarchs in ancient times had the desire to expand their territory, but were often unable to do so. But in Yang Chindong's eyes, all of that was nothing. The reason why he was able to lead his army to conquer such a large territory in just over a decade was because of the advantage brought by the large warehouse. He had advanced weapons that were far superior to those in this world, which was the greatest weapon that made him invincible and invincible. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't want to kill indiscriminately and that he needed to leave a lot of people behind to build his homeland, he could have formed an Air Force helicopter brigade, tank brigade, and war chariot brigade. Just think about it, if he took out those things, who in the world would be a match for him? This was especially true for those large caliber cannons that could shoot up to tens of kilometers, hundreds of kilometers or even more. If he really let them unleash their might, the enemy would often be destroyed before they even knew what they looked like. Yang Chendong did not do that. What he needed was to conquer, not destroy. At the same time, he also needed a powerful army for his use, not an army that only knew how to use the advantage of weapons to fight weak enemies. If that was really the case, what kind of combat power would this army have when he was no longer around? He did not use his strongest ability because he did not need to. Even if he did not use his strongest weapon, he could still conquer one country after another in a very short time, expand his territory, and instill the idea of Han supremacy in the world. Now that he had come to India, it was only natural that he wanted to occupy this place. From then on, India would perish and this country and race would no longer exist in the world. From then on, there would no longer be any incidents of Indians rebelling against China. Before he conquered this place, he did not mind teaching them a lesson, making them remember him forever, so that they would tremble at the thought of the 5-star army, and lose their will to resist. When he thought of doing that, he had to deal them a heavy blow. Therefore, on the morning of the third day, when the sky cleared up and the sun hung high in the sky, the Air Force set off with an order. Over 100 hot air balloons soared into the air above Bidar city. At this time, on the city walls of Bidar, countless Indians were waiting in formation. Beside them, there were many temporary wooden huts. They were all made up of huge wooden sleepers, which were the preparations they had made to defend against the cannons. From the words of the 100,000 defeated soldiers, they knew that the cannons of the 5-star army were extremely powerful, and had a long range as well. Mater had lost in this aspect. Nehru came up with such a method after learning from the mistakes of his predecessors. Although it could not completely suppress the power of the cannons, at least when the cannons were fired, there would be a place to hide. Perhaps they could not avoid being injured or dying in battle, but it was better than nothing. When he thought that he had done all this, he would have the ability to compete with the 5-star army, or at least have the ability to fight a protracted war. But when he heard the exclamations of the soldiers, and saw the hot air balloons that had appeared above the city without him knowing, he was still shocked. What are these things? Nehru did not know, nor did he know what they were used for. But his intuition told him that these things must be very dangerous. After all, being able to fly in the sky was already a breakthrough in the thinking of many people. Because of the backward science, the ancients had always been in awe of the heavens. Before they could figure out whether the earth was round or square, the heavens were always in existence that they had to worship. But now, there were actually people who could fly in the sky. Just this statement alone made the eyes of many Hindustanis show fear. Although the stimulation of wealth did not cause any chaos, it was obvious that the morale of the army was greatly affected when they saw the hot air balloons floating in the sky. Although they did not know what these things floating in the sky were, they knew that they did not have these things, but the Han people did. As soon as the hot air balloons appeared, it attracted the attention of all the Hindustanis in the city. Not only were there 200,000 soldiers, but there were also more than 1 million civilians in the city. India was a large country with a large population at that time. As one of the largest cities in the country, Bidar city had long had more than 1 million civilians. This was also one of the reasons why Nehru was so confident. In his opinion, with so many civilians, as long as he did not suffer a crushing defeat, he could rise again at any time. Under the eyes of millions of people, the hot air balloons arrived above Bidar city. Then, a large number of wooden barrels filled with black oil fell from the sky like a fairy scattering flowers, falling toward Bidar city. Countless wooden barrels fell, but to the Hindustanis who did not know the power of the black oil, this did not make them feel anything. They only instinctively dodged. However, when the wooden barrels fell to the ground, a large amount of black oil poured out. Following that, many fire extinguishers fell from the sky and started a huge fire. That kind of scorching feeling and that kind of threatening fire caused many people to become alarmed and cry out loudly. Some of the kerosene fell on the city tower of Bidar city, and the fire immediately burst into flames. One after another, people shouted to put out the fire. The soldiers began to put out the fire with basins of water. This primitive method of putting out the fire naturally had no effect on the kerosene. Not only that, but the fire also became more vigorous in a short period of time because of the water. Many Hindustani soldiers were caught off guard and were burned by the fire, causing even more miserable screams. On the city tower, Nehru, who was protected by countless palace guards, stared at the scene in front of him with wide eyes, and his body trembled involuntarily. Chapter 1550. He knew that the 5-star army would have cannons to pave the way, and he was prepared to sacrifice some of his men. However, he believed that in the end, the siege still depended on people. As long as they could hold on until the five-star army was blocked outside the city, it would be considered a victory. Under such a series of attacks, when both sides suffered casualties, the scales of victory would slowly tip towards him. After all, he was the king of India. If he was in trouble, the soldiers of other cities would not leave him in the lurch. Especially when they saw that he was in a stalemate with the five-star army, the possibility of them sending reinforcements would greatly increase. When that time came, the five-star army would not have any reinforcements. At that time, even if 2, 3 or even 5 people were sacrificed, the final victor would still be him. This was the reason why Nehru persisted until the end. He firmly believed that with the advantage of nearly 10 million people, he would definitely be able to drive the five-star army out of the country. However, he never expected that the other party would start a fire, and it was the kind of fire that could not be extinguished at all. Perhaps the fire would not hurt many people, but the impact on the morale of the army was unimaginable. When all the soldiers lost their fighting spirit because of the fear of the fire, the five-star army would charge at the right time. Who would be able to stop them? For this battle, he took out all his assets to reward everyone and raise the morale of the army. However, all of this was based on whether they could win and survive. And if they died in battle, what was the use of all the wealth? At this moment, Nehru finally felt fear. He did not know if the five-star army had any other means that they had not used yet. Just a big fire had already left him at a loss. What would he do if there were other ways to attack? The fire continued to light up in the city and could not be extinguished. Anyone who came into contact with the flames would either die or be seriously injured without exception. It did not take long for the city to turn into a living hell. On the other hand, the five-star army outside the city had no intention of attacking the city at all. On the contrary, they set up a formation to prevent the Hindustanis from launching a counterattack in desperation. After that, they began to cook. It didn't take long for the aroma of meat to drift into Vidal city. If it was any other time, the aroma of the meat would definitely make the Hindustanis, who could not even fill their stomachs, swallow their saliva. However, at this moment all of them were vomiting non-stop. There was no other reason other than the fact that many people in the city had already been burned to death and turned into roasted meat. The smell they emitted was actually not much different from the smell of meat. How could it not make people want to vomit? "Young master, when do we attack?" Beta Persei asked curiously as he watched the fire burning everywhere in the city. "Don't worry. This Nehru clearly wants to fight us to the death. How can we let him have his way? Let's burn it for a few days first." Yang Qindong had a confident smile on his face. What he wanted was to exchange the greatest victory for the smallest price. He wanted to see how many more days these Hindustanis could last. Yang Qindong was neither in a hurry nor slow. He had no intention of attacking the city at all. Every day he ordered the Air Force to drop black oil barrels into Vidal city. The fire was put out again and again, and after 5 days of this, the city that had been bustling with life had turned into scorched land. Wails and cries could be heard everywhere. Not only did the fire burn many Hindustani soldiers and civilians to death, but it also ignited the piles of food that were originally stored in the city. The water source was also greatly damaged due to the fire. Seeing that it would not be long before the city fell into a situation of food and water shortage even if the five-star army did not attack the city, Nehru's face turned pale. He finally experienced the feeling of helplessness in the face of the five-star army. He finally understood why the alliance army of nearly 1 million Khanates, which seemed so aggressive and powerful, would still be defeated by the five-star army. This was an army that did not play by the rules, but at the same time they had many trump cards up their sleeves. When faced with such an opponent, it was often impossible to guard against them. It was only natural that they would lose in the end. "Your Majesty, our rations can only last for another 10 days at most. We don't have much water left. If this goes on we—" Finally, one of the generals asked Jawaharlal Nehru in a doubtful tone. "Kill those who incite the army's morale." Nehru did not even look at the general. He just waved his hand. Immediately, the palace guards rushed forward and beheaded the person who spoke. When the other ministers and generals saw this scene, they all shrunk their necks. Nehru wanted to use this method to tell everyone that there was only one path for them to take, and that was to resist to the end. As for those who had other thoughts, they should all go to hell. A general died because of one wrong sentence. This made the others not dare to say anything even if they had other thoughts. They could only hope that the reinforcements would appear or a miracle would happen, and the five-star army would take the initiative to retreat. It was impossible to make the five-star army retreat. Since they came with such a large force, how could they retreat without destroying the Hindustani royal family and occupying this place? As for the reinforcements, No one was a fool. The strength of the five-star army was there for all to see. Unless one had enough confidence, who would easily get involved. What was the difference between that and taking the initiative to die? Days passed and the fire continued to burn fiercely. Every day the Air Force would come to Bidar city. Regarding this, the Hindustanis in the city went from being terrified at the beginning to being indifferent towards the end. They were used to it. But if one looked carefully, one would see that whether it was the soldiers or the civilians, all of them had a look of despair on their faces. Obviously they were all prepared to die. They could not see any hope of survival. Ordinary soldiers and civilians would accept their fate. Or rather, their lives were cheap to begin with. If they died, then so be it. But the ministers, nobles and generals in the city did not want to die. They had families. Some of them had wives and many children. How could they be willing to die just like that? Under the strong pressure, King Nehru's authority was no longer an existence that could suppress everything in their eyes. It was no longer an existence that made them tremble in fear. This was especially so for some of the more knowledgeable officials. The news that they received was that whenever the five-star army conquered a country, they would not kill anyone for no reason. On the contrary, those who surrendered and submitted to the Han people could still live with a tenth of their wealth. They just needed to move to another country. When this news was spread by the secret agents of the intelligence department in the city, and the nobles and people in power knew about it, some people were finally moved. Seeing that if they continued to resist, they would only die. They were unwilling and decided to save themselves. The so-called saving themselves referred to surrendering to the five-star army and seeking a way out for themselves. If they wanted to do this, they had to overthrow the mountain in front of them. King Nehru. Maybe the strength of a minister was limited, and the strength of a general was far from enough. But when everyone joined forces, their strength became very shocking. Under the silent collusion, more than 90% of the people in power had been united. In 1466 AD, in the 6th month, when Nehru was still sleeping, his subordinates rebelled and fought with his guards. In the end, Nehru personally went up and was killed in a chaotic battle. Along with King Nehru being killed, the generals and ministers who took over opened the city gates of Bidar and India surrendered. In the same month, Yang Qindong personally gave the order to establish the India province. The governor was the former 1st Cavalry Army 5th Division Commander Gong Feng. Considering that only the royal family of India was destroyed, there were many cities and armies that had not surrendered. As such, the Second Army was established. The commander was appointed by Governor Gong Feng, and the former Second Army Nyo Duo was under him. Gong Feng was appointed and quickly promoted. Apart from the fact that this person was indeed capable, as he was an all-rounder, which made Yang Qindong feel assured. Another important reason was that other senior officers were not willing to take on this position. For example, Tian Hu, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Army, was used to fighting and killing, especially the feeling of fighting with Yang Qindong. Letting him become the commander of the army seemed to be a promotion, but because of this, he was fixed in one place. This was something he was unwilling to do. There was also Wu Xing, the commander of the 3rd Army, who also had this qualification. But a few years ago he was thrown in Eastern Europe for 10 years. Those days were really hard. Facts also proved that he was a tiger general, not a good minister who ruled the country. There was no need to consider it. Finally, a new commander of the 3rd Army like Su He had enough experience and was brave enough to fight in the war. These years of military merit had already allowed him to join the Han nationality and become one of their own. But he was just a martial artist. He did not know many big words. Counting on him to revitalize and build a place, then forget it. In the end, it was Gong Feng's turn. Although this person did not even have the experience of being a commander, he was now directly appointed as the commander of the army. The promotion was a bit too fast. But don't forget, he was Yang Qindong's student. Whether it was loyalty or ability, he was a top-notch person. Since he had such an advantage, no one could say anything if he was promoted faster. Therefore, this heavy responsibility fell on Gong Feng's head. After receiving the appointment, he knelt in front of Yang Qindong with tears in his eyes. While thanking Yang Qindong for his kindness, he also said that he would do his best to pacify the whole of India, and then seize the time to build and strive for self-sufficiency as soon as possible. He would do his part to strengthen Yang Qindong. At the end of June 1466 AD, King Wunan of Daimyong Yang Qindong led the main army out of India and went straight to the city of Lahore in the north. Chapter 1551. Sultanate Delhi. When the news of the Indian King Nehru's men being killed and the five-star army occupying the heavily defended city of Bidar without sacrificing a single soldier reached Delhi, King Lodi was truly terrified. The way he saw it, even if the Indian army was no match for the 5-star division, they would at least be able to hold on for a few years. That way he would have sufficient time to make preparations. Whether it was recruiting a new army, expressing goodwill to the Han people, or even choosing a place to escape, there would be a path he could take. Who would have thought that the seemingly strong Indian army would be so weak that they would be completely wiped out in just over half a year? Even King Nehru himself couldn't protect himself and was killed by his subordinates. With this lesson in mind, Rodi was extremely fearful of the 5-star army. He was even more afraid that he would be betrayed by his subordinates and be beheaded when the enemy soldiers arrived at the city gates. After careful consideration, he handed over the letter of surrender before the 5-star army could attack him. He was willing to hand over the entire Delhi Sultanate to King Wunan of Damyang. He only asked for a place to spend his remaining years in peace and for the other party to spare his army and people. By the time Yang Qindong arrived at Lahore after spending nearly 2 months, the Sultan's letter of surrender had also arrived. Yang Qindong of course accepted it with a smile. He then led his army straight into the Sultanate and entered the capital of Delhi. Outside the city gates of Delhi, Rodi changed out of his royal robes and wore the plain clothes of a commoner. He knelt in front of the city gates and handed over the king's seal and the tiger-moving seal to Yang Qindong in front of all the officials and commoners. He stayed in Delhi for 5 days and comforted Rodi. He also said that he would send him to Chichen City, where the weather was pleasant and the living facilities were good. It was the best place to spend his remaining years in peace. After that, he met with some of the officials in the country and won over many of their hearts. In the 9th month of 1466, he led the main force of the army out of Delhi, passed through Kanauj Jabuna River, and arrived at the border city of Benares. His army then arrived at the border city of Sadpur in the Barangri kingdom. At this time, the nobles of Bangra were also panicking. India was destroyed and the Delhi Sultanate surrendered. The situation had changed so quickly that it was beyond their expectations. If it was half a year ago, who would have thought that the 5-star army would be so powerful that even the barriers behind them, India and the Delhi Sultanate, which they thought were the safest, had been taken down one by one? Now, Bangla, who was originally at the rear, had become the front line. They had to face the 5-star army head-on. Did they have the ability to do so? Before the main force of the 5-star army could do anything to Sadpur city, 2 different voices were heard in Dhaka city. One wanted to surrender while the other wanted to fight. Most of them were descending. It was clear that Bangla, with a population of less than 3 million and an area much smaller than India, was truly afraid. They might be able to take advantage of the fact that the 5-star army was not paying attention to them to take advantage of them. However, when the 5-star army treated them like a piece of cake and wanted to deal with them, their fear would appear in their bones. As the King Abdul's power was not completely centralized. The power he inherited from his father, Muradin, was not complete. There were even some voices in the country that looked down on him. Him sending troops to Myanmar was also a means to divert everyone's attention. He hoped to use this opportunity to win a few battles to lay his foundation and let everyone know that he was not inferior to his father. On the contrary, he was even stronger. His train of thought was correct. Usually, a new king would use some external methods to settle internal matters and achieve the goal of centralizing power. However, the bad thing was that they should not have chosen the 5-star army as their opponent. Now that they had attracted the attention of this lion, even Abdul was afraid. After learning that the Sultanate had surrendered, Abdul immediately wrote a letter to General Rajiv, who was fighting in Burma. He explained the situation at the rear and asked him to ask for help from the great Ming dynasty's 3rd provincial king, Zhu Huiyun. No matter what, he had to help him. Otherwise, with Bangla's strength, he would not be a match for the 5-star army, who had the strongest firearms. Unfortunately, after writing the letter, it was like a stone sinking into the sea. There was no reply. It was not that Rajiv did not inform Zhu Huiying. Instead, it was that Zhu Huiying could not even protect himself. How could he have the strength to support Bangla? Previously, the matter of the 2 sides working together to divide the Yang faction's territory seemed like a joke now. Perhaps Abdul trusted Zhu Huiying too much and fell for his trap. He attracted such a powerful enemy like the 5-star army. It could be imagined that since they were the ones who made the first move, it was time for them to return the favor with a kick. It was just that Yang Xie's territory was big and his strength was strong. He could take a few kicks like nothing happened, but Bangla was too small. How could they withstand a kick from the 5-star army? Tell Zhu Huiyun that if he doesn't send reinforcements, I will also surrender to the 5-star army like the Sultan. At that time, I will also tell King Wu Nan of the Great Ming Dynasty about his previous promise. He can just wait to be burned by the flames of anger." Abdul, who was furious, said sternly to the newly sent messenger. He just wanted to put on a threatening appearance. If he did not do so, he was afraid that Zhu Huiying would not help him with all his strength. But what Abdul did not expect was that this threat would cause him to lose his life in the end. On the 7th day after he sent out the new emissary, a group of relatively short and serious people came from outside the palace of Bangra. When they appeared at the back door of the palace, they were welcomed in. The palace that was usually tightly guarded was now like an open park in front of these people. There were no secrets to be kept. That night, it was these people who changed into night clothes and quietly appeared outside King Abdul's palace. In the night, these people moved like lightning and were as swift as the wind. The 20 palace guards waiting outside were not even a match for these people in black. In less than half an incense's time, they were all killed. When the leader of the black-clothed people appeared beside the king's bed, Abdul seemed to have sensed something and slowly opened his eyes. "Who are you? Who are you?" When he opened his eyes, he saw a black figure standing in front of him. Out of instinct, Abdul could not help but exclaim. But after that he felt a chill on his neck. It was as if something was flowing out of his body. Then all the strength in his body began to be sucked away bit by bit. Abdul was dead. He died on his bed. Along with the queen, her personal maids and dozens of guards. The king died from an assassination. It was only in the middle of the night when another shift of guards came to take over the shift. Once this was out, the already anxious people of Dhaka city became even more chaotic. In the middle of the night, the entire palace was brightly lit. Many people were shouting to catch the assassins. But obviously they did not even know the exact time of the king's death. How could they catch the assassins? And in less than an hour, a group of black figures left the palace. When they left, the leader of the black-clothed people stopped in his tracks. His eyes revealed a cruel and smug smile. Under the moonlight, one could see a pair of small triangular eyes. If Yang Qindong was here, he would definitely recognize him. He was one of the special ninjas of the Japanese Empire who was on his death list. Satpur City. When Yang Qindong led the 5-star army to the city, the general guarding the city sent out a messenger. The general idea was that the king intended to surrender, but what should he do? He still needed to discuss with the ministers, so he needed some time. He hoped that the 5-star army could wait for a few days. Facing the messenger, Yang Qindong did not feel anything wrong. India was destroyed just like that. The king of India died because of it. Then the king of Delhi Sultanate surrendered. Now it was Bangla's turn. It was reasonable for them to choose to surrender. Yang Qindong could understand the situation. He told the messenger that he could wait for a few days. He didn't even threaten the other party to not play any tricks. Facing the 5-star army who had absolute strength, delaying the battle for a few days wouldn't have any effect. So he wasn't worried that the other party would play such tricks. It should be that Abdul really needed time to discuss with the ministers. After all, the surrender of a country was not a small matter for a country. While waiting, 7 days passed. Satpur city's defense became even tighter. There were also many soldiers on the city tower. Although they knew that their arrows couldn't hit the 5-star army's camp 5 miles away from the city, the soldiers still drew their bows and put on an attitude of, "If you dare to come, I dare to shoot." The situation suddenly became tense. This naturally didn't escape the eyes of the scouts. When the situation was reported back to Yang Qindong, he was also confused. He couldn't understand why Bangla soldiers suddenly became tough. Could it be that they have something to rely on? This doubt was quickly solved. Just like the intelligence personnel in India, the intelligence personnel in the small country of Bangla also didn't enjoy the treatment of having a radio station. So they used people to transmit the news, which made the news less effective. But in the end, the result was still in front of Yang Qindong. Abdul was assassinated. The king of a country was assassinated. It was no wonder that the soldiers of Bangla were so nervous. Who did it? After seeing this news, Yang Qindong's always confident eyes flashed with ruthlessness. Chapter 1552. The assassination order was definitely not given by him, and without his order, no one would dare to do it. Moreover, to assassinate the king of a country in a heavily guarded palace without being discovered afterwards was not something an ordinary person could do. Even in the entire Yangtze, even the spies of the intelligence department's action team couldn't do it. Only people like the Wolf Fang Special Forces, who have been specially trained in beheading operations, could do it. Of course, the high-level ninjas of the Japanese Empire could also do this if they had an insider. In Yang Qindong's eyes, without his order, these two armies wouldn't dare to act without orders. Then who could be the murderer? What good would killing King Abdul do to the person who did it? Yang Qindong, who was puzzled, was really puzzled. This sudden incident was not as simple as the killing of a king. At least, it showed that there was a dark hand behind the scenes that he couldn't see or didn't know about. Since they had the ability to kill King Abdul, then could they also pose a threat to his safety? Of course, Yang Qindong was now at the level of a grandmaster, and he had Okura's protection. Unless someone could kill him in an instant, there would be no chance. But this didn't mean that his family would be safe. Beta Persei immediately sent a report to Yang Wu and asked him to increase the security level of the Resin City Palace. Although he didn't think of the reason, it was necessary to take precautions. Understood. Beta Persei also thought of something and his expression changed drastically, then he turned and went to the telegraph office. Yang Qindong was left alone in the tent, and he was silent for a long time. With Okura's help, there was really no one in the world that could make him feel afraid. If there was one, it would be the people in the dark. Because such a person, you don't know who they are, what kind of means they will use, and what kind of method they will appear in front of you. If he made a mistake and fell into the other party's trap, he would have to pay a heavy price. This was especially true for his family and children in the palace. If any of them were hurt, Yang Qindong would not be able to accept it psychologically. In his previous life, he was an orphan. Other than the military and he had no other relatives. But in this life he had these family members, so as a man he had to protect them well. Anyone who wanted to harm them would have to go through him first. Otherwise, if they suffered any losses, even if he found the culprit and tore him into pieces, it would be too late for regrets. It would not be enough to make up for everything. Who? Yang Qindong, who had been sitting for a long time, slowly stood up. He had already decided to let Yang San investigate this matter personally. At the same time, he had also arranged for the members of the Langya Special Forces to be hidden outside the palace of Resin City as an extra layer of insurance. At this moment he suddenly felt like there was a dagger at his back. But no matter what kind of feelings he had, the problem of Bangla still had to be solved. Their King Abdul was assassinated. Presumably, everyone would think that he was the culprit. If that was the case, it would be impossible to reclaim this place peacefully. After all, how could the five-star army, which even their king could not tolerate, gain the trust of Bangla's officials and generals? Since peaceful means could not solve the problem, then they would fight. Fight until the opponent was afraid, until the opponent surrendered, until Bangla was destroyed. They were the ones who attacked Yangtze's Myanmar province first. Now it was time for them to pay the price. If they were not convinced, then they would fight until they were convinced. If they did not surrender, then they would fight until they surrendered. The death of King Abdul could not stop the advance of the five-star army. Early the next morning, the 2nd and 4th divisions of the Cold Front Division were fully armed and arrived at the outskirts of Sadpur city. When they were 3 miles away, the cannons roared and shells whizzed through the air towards the 5 city towers. After a round of cannon fire, the city walls collapsed. Using this opportunity, the 1st Cavalry Army and the new army's elite cavalry attacked from the left and right respectively. Sadpur city fell. This battle seemed to be very easy. But that was only because of the advantage of the firearms. In fact, it was not that there was no resistance at all. For example, when the 2 cavalry armies charged into the city, they encountered a lot of resistance. Especially after entering the city, there would be people shooting arrows from the dark corners from time to time. Because of this, both cavalry armies suffered casualties, especially the new army. Just after entering the city, the number of soldiers killed and injured exceeded 2,000. For the new army, this was already a defeat. Such a large number of casualties made them too ashamed to face anyone, let alone report the losses to Yang Qindong. But how could Yang Qindong, who always had full control of the army, not know? After listening to Beta Persei's report, he only replied with a cold expression, "Understood." Although it seemed like there was nothing else to say, in the following siege battle, the artillery fire of the Cold Front Division became even fiercer. Not only that, the Air Force was also used. Fire burned the various cities belonging to Bangra. It was as if wherever the army went there would be wails, corpses and scorched earth. This was Yang Qindong's revenge for the resistance of the Bangra people. Weren't you willing to shoot arrows from the back? Fine, I won't even give you the chance to do so. When are you going to blow up the city and burn it again? Only when you have no place to hide will we enter the city. Not only that, along the way the Bangra generals who resisted the five-star army were all skinned alive and wrapped in grass. No matter if it was a dead general or a living general, it was the same. In this battle, the five-star army had shown their cruel side, completely changing the image of the Han people in the eyes of others. They were magnanimous and kind. Yang Qindong never showed mercy to his enemies. Yang Qindong always said to everyone that if one repaid evil with good, how would one repay good? If you are not kind, I will not be righteous. If you can do it on the first day, I will do it on the 15th day. In the end, let's see who is afraid. The kindness of the Han people had always been given to those who had the intention to correct their mistakes and were kind-hearted. As for those kind and black-hearted jackals, forget it. Against them, Yang Qindong had plenty of hunting rifles in his hands. Regarding Yang Qindong's decision, none of the generals in the army objected. Firstly, they were used to seeing life and death, and knew that being kind to the enemy was being cruel to oneself. They knew that if the enemy was not eliminated, it would be harmful to oneself. Secondly, this time it was Bangra who attacked Myanmar first, so it was time to teach them a lesson. It was like when someone punched you, but because of the limited strength the punch did not kill you. Now that it was your turn, of course you had to use as much strength as you could. Thirdly, which was also the most important point, everyone trusted Yang Qindong. Over the years, his position and authority in the army was unchallenged. His words were like the truth and everyone was used to obeying. With the above 3 points, Yang Qindong's orders were naturally carried out with all their might. However, just because the army did not have any objections, it did not mean that the civil officials did not have any opinions. For some reason, this matter spread to Chichen City, as well as some other provinces under Yang Xie's control. It attracted the opposition of some officials and a few scholars. In their view, the Han people were the masters of the world. Since that was the case, they should have a tolerant attitude towards their friends. Especially those who had not been enlightened, they should be more reasonable. Once they knew the etiquette, they would not go against the Han army. What's more, this time it was April who was assassinated first. As his subjects, it was normal for them to retaliate. These rumors were also gathered by the intelligence department and reported to Yang Qindong. This made Beta Persei, who was on the side, curse on the spot. These scholars, to think that they keep talking about those who know the truth and the sage's principles. Don't they even know right from wrong? That bullshit King Abu was not killed by us at all. He was about to surrender. How could we kill him? It was obvious that someone was trying to frame him. How can these people be the accomplices of a villain? Yang Qindong agreed with Beta Persei's words. It was impossible to say that he was not angry. He was fighting and killing on the front lines, risking his life at all times to bring glory to the Han people and let them live a good life. Now they had taken advantage of him and were still acting obedient. What magnanimity, they really did not know fear. With anger in his heart, he curiously looked at the list of names from the intelligence department. He wanted to see who was on it and who he was familiar with. Not to mention the list, he really saw a few familiar faces. For example, the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Ethnic Affairs, Dong Chuanfu, and the Deputy Director of the Ministry of Grain, Yan Lianshui. These two people, because their positions were not low and their positions were very important, their names left some impression in Yang Qindong's heart. As for the others, he didn't care. They were just some unknown names that couldn't arouse his interest in the slightest. The list also recorded some of their opinions. The most important thing was that they were the Celestial Empire and were a country of etiquette, so they should help some small countries. How could the army do such a cruel thing? Yang Qindong only laughed coldly at this. In his eyes, these people were not real scholars. From Yang Qindong's point of view, a true scholar was not only a scholar who could write essays and recite poems, but also a person whose essays were creative and thoughtful. Moreover, they were also people who had humanistic feelings and social sciences. Moreover, real scholars were people who were the most serious, full of a sense of justice, and who cherished their own reputation the most. Jumping out like a group of jumping clowns, belittling others to elevate themselves, pretending to be virtuous, fishing for compliments and looking down on others, such people could not be called scholars. They could only be called a group of arrogant and shameless pseudo-scholars. Chapter 1553. Thinking about it, they were quite pitiful. Because they had low self-esteem, were reclusive, and were not accepted by the world, they could only use such claptrap and lowly methods to attract the public's attention. If it was just to attract the public's attention, Yang Qindong was not willing to comment on it. He had a lot of things to do in a day, and there were also a lot of things that needed to be decided by him. He did not have the time and energy to pay attention to these people who did not have a strong sense of existence. However, they should not have attacked the military. This touched Yang Qindong's bottom line. Yang Qindong's way of ruling the country was not complicated. It could even be said that it was somewhat simple. In order to better manage the areas under his rule, he would give the civil officials great power. He only needed to divide the work. As for the more detailed work, he would let the people under him do it. He only needed to wait and see the results. If the results were good, he would continue to use them. If the results were not good, or if it proved that the person was not capable, he would just replace them. Sometimes he would even indulge the civil officials. This was a form of respect for them and also a strategy to manage the country. After all, the civil officials were important. As long as they were given what they needed, these people would work hard for him. This could solve many of the troubles of a monarch. He could indulge the civil officials, but there was one thing that no one could touch. Even if it was an important official or an indispensable existence in the eyes of others, it was still not allowed. This matter was related to the transfer of military authority in the army. Looking at the history of the dynasties, the reason why the founding monarchs were always at the same level was because they enjoyed the supreme ability to transfer military power. In the later years of the dynasty, due to various needs of balance, the monarchs had to give up military power and began to play all kinds of tricks with the civil officials. By doing so, it seemed that they could hold great power and know everything about the country. However, if they neglected the importance of military power, the final result was that the civil officials could control the military. Once they met a strong opponent, they would not even have the power to fight back. Moreover, a monarch who did not hold military power could not gain the respect of his subjects. After all, if he did not have any means to intimidate them, why should they be afraid of him? Yang Qindong, who understood this principle and saw through its essence, firmly grasped the military power in his hands. In this way, he had the power to change the situation at any time, hanging a sword of Damocles over the heads of the civil officials. As such, they had no choice but to obey. Not only did Yang Qindong do this, but his descendants also had to do this in the future. In this way, they would not have to worry about the collapse of the country. Even if something irreversible happened, at least they would have the ability to protect themselves. With such understanding and deep thinking, how could Yang Qindong change his decision just because of the clamor of some scholars? Since the policy had been set, it would not be easily changed. Not only that, Yang Qindong did not intend to let go of those scholars who were clamoring and picking on him. Not to mention that he was a person who would not rub sand in his eyes, but he was still able to distinguish between right and wrong. What? You're eating my salary and living in the house that I built. How dare you come back and criticize me? With Yang Qindong's authority and influence in Yangxia, they were already so presumptuous. It could be imagined that if his descendants were in this position, they would be even more rampant, right? If it was a more cowardly heir, wouldn't he be eaten by these so-called scholars? If he did not find something for these people to do and let them know that the horse lord had 3 eyes, he was afraid that such things would only happen more and more in the future. Beta Persei, send a telegram to City Lord Yu Qian and Yang Wu. Pick out the people on the list and let them form a temporary diplomatic group. Allow them to go to the camp of the king of the 3 provinces, Zhu Huiyun. Also, tell them that I can do as they say without using a sword or a spear. Then, I need them to influence the king of the 3 provinces, and let them urge and force Zhu Huiyun to surrender unconditionally immediately. Otherwise, no one can guarantee what the consequences will be. Beta Persei took notes with a pen at the side, but as he wrote, he laughed out loud. This was clearly a means for the young master to deal with these scholars. It was simply impossible to make the other party surrender unconditionally. The king of the 3 provinces, Zhu Huiyun, who had hundreds of thousands of soldiers, was not the kind of person who would wait for death. If he was, he would not have harmed his eldest brother and 3rd brother to seize power. However, in Beta Persei's view, this was a good thing. Who asked those scholars to criticize the army when they had nothing better to do? Did they really think that they were in the Ming dynasty? Did they really think that they were those imperial censors who could make a rumor about anything, and even if there was an accident they would not be blamed for it? Now, I'm asking you to negotiate with Zhu Huiyun, the person who killed his brother. If you have anything to say, you can say it to him. But remember to be careful. Don't provoke the other party and end up angering him. If that happens, even the gods won't be able to save you. When Beta Persei was trying hard to hold back his laughter, Yang Qindong spoke again. Send a telegram to Deputy City Lord Luan Shaoqian. Tell him to keep an eye on this matter. If anyone on this list dares to not go, they will be stripped of their official position and will never be employed again. Their descendants will also not be able to be officials for 3 generations. Yang Qindong was worried that these people would play tricks when they saw the real move, so he came up with such a punishment system. Don't underestimate these so-called scholars who boasted of being virtuous and virtuous. Pick out one of them and put them in the future, they would all be at the level of emperors. Especially when it came to pretending to be dead, they were all top-notch experts. If they didn't set some bottom lines, they would really come up with all kinds of tricks. The telegram flew straight to Crimson City and soon appeared on the desk of the City Lord of Crimson City, Yu Qian. Not only that, but Deputy City Lord Luan Shaochen and Yang Wu of the Yang family also received the same telegram. The telegram was made public and had no intention of keeping it a secret. In just half a day the news had spread everywhere. Dong Chuanfu, who was named in the telegram, had a gloomy expression on his face. In his office, Yan Lianshui, the deputy director of the grain department, was crying and complaining with tears and snot running down his face. Elder Dong, they clearly don't see eye to eye with us. They think we're talking too much and want to make an example out of us. As our leader, you must speak out against it. I don't want to face the king of the 3 provinces. I heard that this person even killed his brothers. He's a demon king. Yan Lianshui fully displayed his acting skills as an award-winning actor. His face was full of pitiful and tears flowed freely from his eyes. Those who didn't know would think that he had suffered a great grievance. When he said this, Dong Chuanfu's face became even uglier. What did he mean by being the leader? He wasn't going to take the blame for this. Thus he said coldly, Deputy Director Yan, pay attention to your status. This matter was voluntary from the beginning to the end. No one forced anyone, let alone being the leader. After this reminder, Yan Lianshui realized that he had said something wrong and quickly corrected himself. Yes, Elder Dong is right. We were willing. However, our intentions were good. We didn't want to see the 5-star army brutally kill people. There's nothing wrong with this. Now, you want us, the civil officials, to persuade the king of the 3 provinces to surrender? This is an impossible task. Perhaps we won't be able to return. Elder Dong, you are someone whose city lord you personally wrote a letter to invite. You have a lot of face, so you must report this matter truthfully. Humph. This time, Dong Chuanfu didn't say anything to refuse. He was indeed summoned by Yu Qian from the southern Ming dynasty. At that time, he was just an unsuccessful 7th-rank imperial censor in the southern Ming dynasty. He was getting older and was about to die. At this time, Yu Qian sent someone to deliver a letter to him. He thought about the current situation and saw that Bugnam of Gojoseon was going to replace the great Ming dynasty. Thus, he made the decision to join the southern Ming dynasty and become the deputy chief. In reality, it wasn't just Dong Chuanfu. In the entire Yangxia dynasty there were many people like him. They were all invited by Yu Qian or their colleagues who had been officials in the great Ming dynasty. However, these people had a common characteristic. Whether it was in the southern Ming dynasty or in Baiming, they were the type of people who weren't used in important positions. Otherwise, they wouldn't have abandoned their families and come to the Yangxia dynasty. After all, in the eyes of many people, the great Ming dynasty was the orthodox. Dong Chuanfu, who was personally invited by Yu Qian, was very proud of himself. Relying on this, even the head of the Ministry of Ethnic Affairs, his immediate superior, was rarely in his eyes. Now that something had happened, he naturally had to ask Yu Qian for help. Alright, I'll go look for City Lord Yu now. All of you just stay here quietly and don't say anything that goes too far. Dong Chuanfu stood up from behind the desk and tidied up his clothes. Under Yan Lianshui's admiring gaze, he walked out of the office. The main responsibility of the Ethnic Affairs Department was to adjust the conflicts between the various ethnic groups in order to achieve harmony. In the end, they would eliminate the barriers and become one family. Just from this point alone, it was a very important department. When Yu Qian recommended Dong Chuanfu for the position of deputy minister, he had high hopes. He believed that with this person's ability he would be able to do things well. Therefore, as someone who was valued by Yu Qian, Dong Chuanfu didn't need to make an appointment to see the city lord. When the staff of the city lord's manor saw Dong Chuanfu appear, they first greeted him with a smile. Then, with the excuse that the city lord was still busy and needed to wait for a while, they invited him to a nearby lounge. Dong Chuanfu didn't think too much at first, but after staying for more than 2 hours, his expression became a bit ugly. In particular, he hadn't seen anyone pour tea for him in such a long time. How could he not know that he was being ignored? Chapter 1554. Thinking about it, he was just called by Yang Qindong. Although on the surface it was said that he was entrusted with an important task, anyone with a clear mind could see that there was clearly a problem. At this time, who wouldn't stay away from him? How could anyone take the initiative to approach him? This was the official scene. When he was proud, he was surrounded by flowers. When he was frustrated, he was surrounded by holes. Sigh. After a sigh, Dong Chuanfu knew that his situation was a bit dangerous, but the more it was like this, the more he had to find Yu Qian and argue with him. Otherwise he would really be finished. He got up, strode out of the lounge and went straight to the floor of the city lord mansion. During this period, although there were staff members stopping him, he really ignored them until he pushed the door upstairs. He didn't even knock on the door, which was enough to show the anger in Dong Chuanfu's heart now. When he pushed the door in, he saw Yu Qian wearing a pair of reading glasses and looking down at something. When the two looked at each other, Yu Qian showed a puzzled look. "Inghai, why are you here?" Inghai was Dong Chuanfu's name. Usually, only familiar people would call him like this. When Dong Chuanfu saw Yu Qian's stunned expression, he knew that the people below must not have reported his arrival. Thinking that it was not that Yu Qian didn't want to see him, the anger in his heart also subsided a lot. However, the staff behind him, seeing Dong Chuanfu break into the city lord's office without any etiquette, couldn't help but show a helpless look on his face. He seemed to want to explain something to Yu Qian. These staff members of the city lord mansion had long been convinced by Yu Qian's feelings and work attitude for the country. This time they also knew that Dong Chuanfu came to ask for help. In order to reduce some pressure on Yu Qian, they acted on their own initiative and didn't want to arrange a meeting. Who was Yu Qian? His brain was very flexible. No one said anything, just the situation in front of him, he guessed most of it. He also knew that the staff members were doing this for his own good, but since he was here, he couldn't just kick him out. He had to see him anyway, so he waved his hand and said to the staff members, "You can leave, I will have a good chat with Inghai." The staff had no choice but to withdraw, but there were still some discerning people who went to the office of the deputy city lord, Wuan Shaochen, on the lower floor. After the office door was closed, Yu Qian stood up and personally poured a cup of tea for Dong Chuanfu. Then he sat down on the sofa in the reception area. "Inghai, you already know?" In public. Dong Chuanfu raised his head and wanted to say something. However, Yu Qian waved his hand and said, "Inghai, you were too reckless this time. You don't know what happened at all. You just listened and believed some things that you shouldn't have said. Now that the king is angry, the consequences are very serious." Since Yu Qian had spoken such serious words, Dong Chuanfu's face immediately fell. He just wanted to make his presence known and increase his fame and influence. One had to know that he had often used this method in the Great Ming and Southern Ming dynasty. Usually, you would only be promoted if you had enough influence. Then you would have a smooth career path. However, he never expected that the same method would lead to such a disaster in Yangxia. It would be a lie to say that Dong Chuanfu didn't regret it. Therefore he opened his mouth and said, "In public, I know my mistake. Please save me." Yu Qian, who had always taken good care of his colleagues, shook his head helplessly. This time, when such a thing happened, Yang Qindong didn't send a telegram to the city lord's residence to deal with it. Instead, he directly explained the way to deal with it. Moreover, he also informed Yang Wu and Wuan Shaochen. This made it impossible for him, the city lord, to say anything. Who was Yang Wu? He was one of the 5 generals of the Yang family. The entire Bugnam of Gojoseon Palace's security was in his hands. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that when Yang Qindong wasn't in Chichen City, all the people who were loyal to Yangxia had to listen to him. Sometimes, his words were even more effective than the city lord's residence. Who was Wuan Shaochen? He wasn't just Yang Qindong's brother-in-law. He was also a 2-time provincial governor and had more than 10 years of experience in governing a place. His ability wasn't inferior to Yu Qian's. If it wasn't for the fact that he was still young and didn't have enough experience, he might even be able to replace Yu Qian's position as the city lord. Even so, Wuan Shaochen was seen as the most popular candidate to succeed Yu Qian. Once Yu Qian was old and had to retire, it would be time for this person to take over. It was to the point that some of the young staff in the city lord's residence looked to him as their leader. With the help of these 2 people, Yu Qian didn't have much room to maneuver. In addition, he was also leaning towards Yang Qindong's decision. What happened at the front, most people at the back only had a rough idea. However, for someone with a high position like him, he naturally knew a lot more details. Someone killed King Abdul of Bangla and framed the 5-star army for it. In the following battle, the entire country retaliated, which caused Yang Qindong to be angry. He also didn't want his soldiers to be hurt by hidden arrows, which was why he carried out such a cruel massacre. In the end, this was a military strategy. Everyone wanted to obtain the most benefits with the least losses. It wasn't clear who was right or wrong. But now, someone actually went to command the five-star army and blamed Yang Qindong. And the person who blamed was Yang Xie's subordinate. It would be strange if Bugnam of Gojoseon wasn't angry. Since he knew the cause and effect of this matter, whether it was for public or private reasons, Yu Qin wouldn't stop this matter. If the person involved wasn't Dong Xuanfu, who he had worked hard to win over from the southern Ming Empire, he wouldn't even care about this. Even if he did care with Yu Qin's personality, he would just tell the truth and do the work of the other party. As for personal reasons, he didn't even want to think about it. Yu Qin wasn't that kind of person. In history, if he was willing to go along with other people, his family wouldn't be unable to even afford a coffin after his death. He even needed to take care of the embroidered uniform guards in the future. Inghai, no one can help you with this matter. You have to think of a way to save yourself and complete the mission the king gave you. Yu Qin thought about it and felt that this was the only way. When he heard that he had to complete the mission and meet the king of the three provinces, Zhu Huitong, he was afraid that it would be disastrous. Immediately, Dong Xuanfu said with a sad face, "In public, this is a 90% chance of death." Even if it's a 90% chance of death, so what? You still have to go. Yu Qian's face suddenly became serious as he spoke with a firm voice. In history, this person didn't take personal life and death seriously. When the Great Ming's wooden fortress was defeated and Yeshen of Walla led his troops, everyone was in a panic. Some people even thought about moving the capital to Nanjing. Only he stood up without hesitation. In the end, he was the one who turned the tide. How could such a person be afraid of death? As long as he thought that something was worth doing, even if he was in the vortex of death, he wouldn't frown. After being refuted by Yu Qin, Dong Xuanfu knew that he had no other choice. He could not go. If he didn't go, he would be removed from his position. Not only that, his descendants wouldn't be allowed to become officials for 3 generations. In that case, the entire Dong family would be harmed by him. He didn't want to be the sinner of the family. Then I'll go. Dong Xuanfu sighed in his heart and finally made a decision. Go. At worst he would die. If that was the case, he believed that with this merit, his descendants would also be touched by the glory. He could be considered to have done his last bit for the family. Yu Gong, it's hard to predict whether this trip will be good or bad. If something happens, I'll have to trouble Yu Gong to take care of my family. You can rest assured that after you leave, your family won't be bullied by anyone. Besides, with our Yang Xie's current ability, the 3 provincial kings won't dare to do anything to you unless they don't want to live. At the end of his words, Yu Qin's voice involuntarily rose a lot. This was his biggest gain after following Yang Qindong for so many years. That was, he could speak with confidence and was no longer afraid of being attacked by others. Because they didn't find trouble with others, it was already fortunate. On the first floor, someone had already reported to Luan Shaoqian that Dong Xuanfu had appeared and went to find Yu Qian. In this regard, Luan Shaoqian just smiled and said that he understood. Then he went to do what he needed to do. Although he hadn't been in the city lord's mansion for too long, he still understood Yu Qian. This was not a person who was biased. This was something that Yang Qindong said in a very serious tone. Since it was Yang Qindong who said it, Luan Shaoqian naturally didn't have any doubts. Luan Shaoqian believed that City Lord Yu Qian would be able to handle this matter well. The facts also proved that Dong Xuanfu left not long after and returned home. He ordered people to pack his luggage as if he was going to go on a long journey to the place of the 3 provincial kings. Yang Qindong didn't pay too much attention to what happened in Crimson City. He left the matter to Yu Qian, Yang Wu and Luan Shaoqian. If it wasn't done well, then wouldn't it mean that the Yang Xie had no one to use? Not paying attention to Crimson City, his eyes were more focused on the Bangla kingdom. After showing a strong attitude and putting it into action, the so-called revenge for the king became quieter and quieter. No one wasn't afraid of death, especially this King Abdul who didn't treat his people well. After resisting for a few days and paying a huge price, they finally became obedient. When the main force of the 5-star army appeared in front of some cities, even more people chose to surrender for their own safety. Faced with the Bangla army that suddenly became docile, the 5-star army naturally didn't start a brutal massacre. They acted as if those who surrendered could live and everyone would be fine. As a result, their progress became even faster. In the 12th month of 1466 AD, they arrived at the capital of Bangla, Dhaka city. Here, General Caldwell presented his letter of surrender. From then on, this place became one of the territories under Yang Xie's control. Chapter 1555. In the palace of Dhaka city, Yang Qindong admired the scenery under the guidance of General Caldel. In the great hall of the palace, Yang Qindong sat high up on the throne and listened to the surrendered general talk about the current situation in Bangra. Ever since King Abdul was assassinated, the situation in the country had been chaotic beyond control. Various factions had emerged. Among them were the Avengers, the Warmongers, those who wanted peace and those who only cared about themselves. Before this, the Five-Star Army had come with fury and forced the Vengeance faction and the War faction to abandon their weapons and armor. Now they were either dead, injured, or fleeing. They could no longer pose a threat. Otherwise, Caldel, the general of the Peace faction, wouldn't have submitted his letter of surrender. However, the Warmongers still existed and they were all generals with military power. For example, Rajiv, who was still causing trouble in Burma, was a representative of this group. According to Caldel, other than Rajiv, Azad and General Hark each led 10,000 soldiers into Burma from Bangra. They would probably cause some damage. Yang Qindong looked at Caldel's lowered head in self-reproach. He didn't intend to scold him. This had nothing to do with him. It was already a great deed for him to represent Dhaka in surrendering to the Five-Star Army and averting the disaster of war. Very good, General Caldel. You still have some military power in your hands, don't you? Yang Qindong thought about how he would have to face the Bangra army and the three provinces' royal armies, who were provoking him. There would probably be a lot of killing. The security behind him would become even more important. Reporting to King Wunan of Damyang. The guilty general still has 20,000 soldiers. However, they are all foot soldiers and no cavalry. Their combat ability is average. Caldel spoke the truth without any exaggeration. Seeing Caldel's sincerity, Yang Qindong smiled and nodded. 20,000 people, not a small number. This way you can continue to retain your position as a general. This prince will also leave you with an army to cooperate with you in defending Bangla from the flames of war. Sai, this place shouldn't be called Bangla. Aren't there a lot of Bengalis here? Let's change the name to Bengal in the future. Are you willing? Originally, he thought that since he was a surrendered general, he would be lucky to be able to keep his life and a small portion of his wealth. Who would have thought that Yang Qindong would trust him so much that he would not deprive him of his military power and even let him guard this place? He was so moved that he immediately knelt on the ground and said, "Thank you, Bugnam of Gojosian, for your kindness. Thank you, Bugnam of Gojosian, for your kindness. There's no need to thank me. Just do your job well. Also, you won't be able to stay here permanently in the future. According to Yang Xie's rules, everyone here will have to move out. During this time, you will have to do the statistics, pacify the people, and do the related propaganda work. Where is the commander of the Mabe division, Na Ri Song? Your subordinate is here." Senior Colonel Na Ri Song, who had been standing in the hall, stepped out of the formation. Na Ri Song had originally been the deputy commander of the Mabe division. However, after leaving the Mabe region and fighting with the army, he was finally promoted to commander. But in reality he should be the commander of the 2nd Division of the Mabe Division because the real commander, Xian Honghai, was still in the Mabe region. "Commander Nari, I now officially appoint you as the commander of the 2nd Division of the Mabe Division. I will leave the matters here to you. General Caldel will cooperate with you. What this prince needs is for the public security here to be restored in the shortest time possible. Are there any problems?" Yang Qindong smiled as he looked at the old man who had followed him for many years. "Your subordinate will not disappoint the 6th young master," Na Ri Song said in a clear voice. This was truly his first time leading an army alone. Before, he had been following the main forces of the Five-Star Army. Even though he had military merits, it was not as satisfying as leading an army by himself. Now that he had the chance, he would definitely perform well. At the beginning of 1467 AD, when the new year began, Yang Qindong led the main forces of the Five-Star Army out of Bengal and headed straight for the neighboring Burma province. At this time in Burma, the so-called invading Gera army had already retreated from the territory of the 3 provincial kings of the southern Ming when they heard that the main forces were coming. They didn't even have the courage to face them and retreated thousands of miles away. In February, Yang Qindong's main forces met up with the Burmese, Laotian, and Vietnamese local armies that had been guarding this place for a long time. Yang Qindong saw Bu Hai, the commander of the 7th Division of the Lung Fong Division. Although the other side only had 2,000 people, the 2,000 Lung Fong Firearms Division soldiers had become the main force. If it wasn't for their existence, the Burmese provincial capital would be in even more danger. Yang Qindong praised these people for their tit-for-tat with the Gera army. He said in public that no matter who it was, if they dared to have ideas about Yang Xie, then they would fight back. Not only that, they would also occupy their homeland. At the same time, he announced that the former Gera, now Bangladesh, had become another province of Yang Xie. The generals were naturally encouraged by Yang Qindong's fearless personality. With the arrival of Yang Qindong's main forces, the Burma War also came to an end. However, the overall war was not over. On the contrary, it was just another beginning. For example, the escaped Gera generals, Rajiv, Azad, and Hak had already escaped to the territory of the three provincial kings. These people were going to be punished. There was also the matter of the three provincial king Zhu Huixin, who had previously sent soldiers to Yunnan province. It was time for an explanation. Several years ago, Yang Qindong had entered the Far East through the first city. Then he had killed his way into Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and now he had returned to Southeast Asia. In this period of time he had occupied more than twice the territory of Yang Xie, subduing and conquering dozens of small and large countries. From the current map, other than the Yusang region which was still in battle, the other regions had all fallen into Yang Xie's hands. Whether it was Baiming or Nanming, they were all like meat stuffing in a steamed bun. Dealing with the problem of Nanming and Baiming was also on the agenda. Once they were dealt with, all of Asia would belong to Yang Xie. He was getting closer and closer to conquering the entire world and allowing the Han people to stand at the peak. It's time. With a light sigh, Yang Qindong led his army from Myanmar to Yunnan province. That would be the entrance to the territory of the three provincial kings. The three provincial king Zhu Huixin did not look well recently. Originally, Yang Qindong was caught up in the battle with the Khaganate and did not have the energy to deal with him. This should be the time for him to rise. For example, once he conquered Myanmar and Yunnan province, the five-star army would be in a state of chaos. If Yang Qindong divided his forces, there would be a higher chance of him being defeated by the Khaganate alliance. At that time, the massive Yang Xie would instantly fall apart. That would be the time for him to rise as the three provincial king. Putting everything else aside, just taking over the territories of Yang Xie would be a huge fortune. Just thinking about this made Zhu Huixin extremely excited. This was also the main reason why he dared to send troops to deal with Yang Qindong. However, his wishful thinking was quickly disrupted. When the five-star army destroyed the Khaganate alliance, India, and subdued the Suhi kingdom of Delhi, even the Bangra kingdom was crushed. Finally, it was time for him to face the five-star army head-on. When he heard that Yang Qindong had already arrived at the Beijiang prefecture of Yunnan province with the main force of the five-star army, Zhu Huixin was terrified. He immediately looked for Mo Gue, who had provided him with 5 million taels of silver, and asked him for a plan. Mo Gue had appeared when Yang Qindong was confronting the Khaganate alliance. He had also appeared with 5 million taels of silver, saying that it was a gift from his master. He also said that Bugnam of Gojoseon was now trapped in the war in the west and it was time for them to strike back. After seeing the silver taels and analyzing the situation, especially after seeing that the Gurkha army had already started to attack Myanmar, Zhu Huiyu thought that the opportunity had come. He ordered his subordinate general Wang Zhanjiang to lead 150,000 troops from Liangshan into Yunnan province. He wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to obtain some benefits. The original plan was very smooth. The sudden attack of the three provincial armies had indeed caught the five-star army off guard. They had taken over Liangshan, Qidai, Langzhuang and other places. However, they had encountered some difficulties when attacking Beijiang prefecture. Relying on his advantage in numbers, Zhu Huixin did not take it seriously. Until the sudden appearance of the Lung Feng division, the battle had fallen into a stalemate. However, it was just a stalemate. According to General Wang Zhanjiang's report, they could not take down Beijiang prefecture, but the five-star army in the prefecture could not do anything to them either. It was clearly a situation where they were evenly matched. However, now that Yang Qindong had appeared near Beijiang prefecture with more than 200,000 troops, they no longer had the advantage in numbers. It was obvious what would happen next. That was the main force, not the third-rate forces of the provincial armies that they had faced before. The soldiers who were qualified to follow Yang Qindong were definitely veterans who had experienced hundreds of battles and could fight against 10 people each. In such a situation, the first thing Zhu Huixin should do was to order Wang Zhanjiang to retreat. However, he still wanted to try his luck and see if the mysterious man's representative, Mo Gue, had any good suggestions. After all, he felt that the master behind this person was very capable and might be able to save him. He came to Mo Gue's courtyard with hope. As soon as he entered, He saw the man standing in front of the pond in the courtyard with his hands behind his back. Needless to say, he was Emogue. At this time, looking at Emogue's back, the early morning sun shone on him, giving him a very mysterious feeling. This was the feeling that he needed. He would not forget Uncle Ying's instructions when he came, which was to speak less and act mysterious. In short, the more mysterious, the better. Chapter 1556. In order to achieve this goal, Emogue had indeed spoken very little ever since he came to the territory of the three provincial kings. In order to keep a low profile, he would reveal some crucial information from time to time. Moreover, they were all extremely confidential information about Yang Xie, some of which couldn't be bought with money. Hence, he was extremely mysterious. Mr. Emo, as soon as he saw Emogue's figure, Zhu Huihua somehow felt a lot more confident, and he also became much more confident when he spoke. "Yes, Your Highness." Upon hearing the voice, Emogue turned around. He was a very ordinary-looking young man who would be forgotten very quickly if he was thrown onto the streets. Seeing that Emogue was bowing, Zhu Huihua hurriedly stepped forward and made a gesture of greeting. "Mr. Emo, please don't stand on ceremony. Actually, I have something to ask you this time." "Oh, Your Highness, you mean that Bugnam of Gojoseon has led the main army to Beijiang Prefecture, right?" As usual, Emogue said as if he had already guessed the outcome as soon as Zhu Huihua spoke. Zhu Huihua was already used to Emogue's foresight. He immediately chuckled and said, "That's right, but what do you think, Mr. Emo?" "Let's talk," Emogue said after hesitating for a moment. Then, afraid that the other party wouldn't understand, he said with a smile, "We can't defeat them. The combat power of the five-star army's main force is not something an ordinary army can match. However, if we can negotiate, there will be a chance." Zhu Huihua also agreed with Emogue's words. He knew very well what kind of soldiers he had in his hands. They were formed by some young men for the sake of earning money. Many of them had never even seen blood before. It would be impossible for such an army to defeat veterans on the battlefield, not to mention that the five-star army also had the most powerful firearms in the world. On the battlefield, the death rate of recruits was the highest. If the battle was more difficult, the death rate could reach 60% or even higher. This meant that after a battle, 10 recruits might die or be unable to continue fighting due to injuries, leaving only about 4 people left. In the second battle, this ratio would be even lower and they might lose 1 or 2 people. After 3 to 5 battles, it would be considered good if 1 or 2 of the initial 10 people were left. Only the soldiers who stayed behind could be considered veterans of 100 battles and be called elites. Such a ratio could be found everywhere in the five-star army, especially in the world's first cavalry army and the new army, where more than 90% of the soldiers were elites. What kind of terrifying battle prowess would they possess? One could even imagine it with one's toes. It was normal to lose, but when he heard that there was a chance to negotiate, Zhu Huichun was a little confused. There was a negotiator sent by Yang Xie in Yunnan Manor, but he didn't have the intention to do so before, so he just threw him into the courtyard and didn't bother with him. Why do they want to negotiate now? Emogue shook his head when he saw Zhu Huiyun's confused expression. He walked up and whispered something into Zhu Huiyun's ear. When Emogue's whisper fell into Zhu Huihua's ears, he could see a clear change in the listener's expression. At that moment, his face was full of shock as if he had seen a magnitude 10 earthquake. His shock was mixed with fear. "Are you scared? This is your only chance. If you succeed, the benefits will be unimaginable." Emogue knew that Zhu Huihua would be shocked and hesitate. When he first heard about the plan from Uncle Ing, he didn't seem any better than Zhu Huihua. But now that he thought about it, it was a good chance to turn the tables. If they succeeded, the impact and significance would be huge. Many people would be happy to see it happen. This. After a long while, Zhu Huihua still couldn't finish his sentence. In the end, Emogue said, "Don't say this and that. Other than this, do you think His Highness has a better idea?" This time, His Highness sent troops to Yunnan province first, so he must have angered Bugnam of Gojoseon. "Do you think you will have a good time? But this is what you want. I believe you." Zhu Huihua wanted to explain. Emogue didn't give him a chance to continue, or he didn't think it was necessary. "Us? Your Highness, do you think Bugnam of Gojoseon will listen to you if you explain this to him? You are the king of 3 provinces. If you don't want to do something, no one can force you to do it, right?" In the face of such a rhetorical question, Zhu Huili was speechless. Yes, he was the one who gave the order to send troops to Yunnan province. That was an undeniable fact. Based on that fact alone, he wouldn't have a good ending. Sigh. After a long sigh, Zhu Huichen asked, "But I don't know how many chances there will be if we do this." Hearing Zhu Hui's question, Mo Gui finally smiled. It was enough to prove that he had thought it through and was thinking about how to execute it. Mo Gui said confidently, 100%. As long as we follow the plan, he will die. Hearing such confidence, Zhu Huitu finally gritted his teeth and said, "Since that's the case, let's take a gamble. However, if anything goes wrong, I hope that Mr. Mo will lend a hand." No problem. Seeing that Zhu Huichen had agreed, Mo Gui's face revealed a relieved expression. Perhaps his mission was about to be completed. In a small courtyard in a straight alley of Yunnan East Main Street, 18 men in Chinese tunic suits were sighing as they sat in the courtyard. They all had the same expression, full of worry and worry. They were none other than the group of civil officials who had previously questioned the Five-Star Army's massacre in the Delhi Sultanate. When Yang Qindong heard about this, they became ambassadors and were responsible for negotiating with the kings of the three provinces. They also changed into Yang Xie's formal attire, Chinese tunic suits. The leader of the group was Dong Chuanfu, the vice minister of the Ministry of Ethnic Affairs. With his rank, he could be considered a senior official. He could sit in a bright and spacious office in Rezin City and give out orders. There would naturally be people working for him. Then he could drink hot tea, take a hot bath that was prepared 24 hours a day, and talk about life. He could enjoy a decent salary and live a happy life with his family. He didn't have to care about the fights outside. But because he didn't keep his mouth shut, he ended up like this. They came to Yunnan Manor. Apart from the pleasant weather, it couldn't compare to Rezin City in any way. When they first came here, they were disgusted by the fact that they had to go to the toilet. Thinking back to when they were in Crimson City, whether it was the office building or the building they lived in, there were toilets, and drains that could be used. But now, in this small courtyard, they had to go to the toilet in the same place. The weather was getting hotter and hotter. Just the smell was unbearable, not to mention the flies flying around. Although it was the same in the past, after enjoying the modern treatment in Rezin City, the feeling of going back to the old life was worse than death. However, they had no choice because it was Yang Qindong's orders in the first place. Besides, he even named them. Hence, none of them could escape. Even though he knew that it would be difficult to complete the task, he still had to come. He was no longer doing it for himself, but for the sake of his entire family. Along the way, they first arrived in Yunnan Province, after which they headed north. During this period, they set off from Beijiang Prefecture, which allowed them to see the true appearance of the battlefield. When they saw the corpses and blood all over the ground, as well as the stench that did not dissipate for a long time, this kind of visual experience was far from what was recorded in the books of the sages. This also made them realize how cruel war was. The slightest carelessness could cause them to lose their lives. They wanted to let them know clearly how tough it was for the Five-Star Army to conquer the East and West. They wanted to let them know that perhaps the Five-Star Army had their own reasons for doing what they did in the Delhi Sultanate. Some people said that reading 10,000 books was not as good as traveling 10,000 miles. That scene was actually happening to Dong Chuanfu and the others now. It was only when their thinking changed that they realized their mistake. When they arrived at Yunnan Prefecture, they were thrown into a small courtyard and not allowed to leave. They also realized that the task this time wasn't that easy to complete. If they didn't do it well, they might even lose their lives here. Although the 18 officials were prepared to die before coming here, they were all prepared to die. However, as long as there was a little hope of survival, who wouldn't try their best to grab it? There was a change in their mentality, and they clearly knew that it wouldn't be easy to leave. Everyone was only thinking about one thing, and that was how to complete the negotiation task given to them by Yang Qindong. As for whether they would still be talkative if they survived this time, the 18 of them would probably become very obedient even without being reminded. However, they had to negotiate first, right? Now that they couldn't even see a single person, who were they supposed to negotiate with? How were they supposed to complete the task? How were they supposed to influence their opponents? Of course, there was no such thing as influence. However, they had to see the person in question before they could talk, right? After being thrown into the courtyard for more than 10 days, everyone's temperament gradually became impatient. While they were reflecting on their mistakes, they were also cursing Zhu Huiyun, the prince of the three provinces, in their hearts for being disloyal, unfilial, and immoral. They could only curse in their hearts. After coming to Yunnan Prefecture from Chichen City, they finally understood what it meant to live under someone else's roof, and what it meant to act according to other people's wishes. especially after seeing the soldiers of the 3 provinces waiting outside the courtyard. They were here to protect their safety, but in fact weren't they monitoring their every move? If necessary, they might even kill them all. Chapter 1557. At this time, the mentality of Dong Chuanfu and the others had completely changed. They were thinking about 2 things in their hearts. One was whether they would die or not. If the 2 sides didn't come to an agreement and went to war, they would probably become the first batch of martyrs. At this time they had completely forgotten their identity. They were here to negotiate. Rather than placing their hopes on others, they might as well work hard themselves. The second thing they thought about was the change in their mentality. The 3 provincial kings were truly crazy and wanted to kill them all. They only hoped that the 5-star army could avenge them and kill all of the 3 provincial armies. At this moment they finally understood the actions of the 5-star army in Bangla. They even thought that the 5-star army didn't kill enough to intimidate the enemy. Otherwise, why would the 3 provincial kings look down on them? No. It should be said that they were ignoring them. Everyone knew how to talk high and mighty. Their words didn't have any substance and wouldn't resonate with others. However, if they were in the same situation, they probably wouldn't say any lies, big words, or empty words. From this, it could be seen that Yang Qindong brought these 18 people with different views on war here. The effect was already evident. As the saying goes, if you don't manage the household, you don't know the cost of firewood and rice. Presumably, if they could survive, their opinions would definitely change if there was a war in the future. It was even possible for them to become staunch supporters of war. From this point alone, Yang Qindong's arrangement was correct. In the future, if someone wanted to talk about the cruelty of war and wanted to use benevolence or universal love to talk about it, they only needed to follow the example. Presumably, those dissenting voices would be completely suppressed. Dong Chuanfu and the others spent every day trembling in fear. They didn't know what would happen in the next second. It was like when the door to the courtyard was suddenly opened and Qin Tian suddenly appeared in front of everyone. They instinctively didn't know what was going on. What did this person want to do? As the most trusted minister of the 3 provincial kings, Qin Tian could definitely be called the #1 civil official. Many times his opinions could influence Zhu Huihua. Such a busy and important person suddenly appeared in the small courtyard. Dong Chuanfu and the others were only stunned for a moment before they came to their senses and hurriedly stood up and saluted. Logically speaking, with everyone's status, especially Dong Chuanfu, who was already the vice minister of a department, people like him had the opportunity to take charge of a region and become a provincial governor at any time. His status had already far surpassed Zhu Huihua's subordinate Qin Tian, who only had a territory of 3 provinces. However, under the eaves of others, he had no choice but to lower his head. In order to survive and complete the mission, Dong Chuanfu had to learn how to humble himself. So it's Lord Qin. Excuse me for not going out to meet you. Dong Chuanfu stood up to greet Qin Tian. Although he was happy to be able to talk to Qin Tian on the surface, Dong Chuanfu still had an unhurried appearance. He probably knew that at this time he was not only representing himself, but also the powerful Yang faction. Haha, Minister Dong is too polite. Hello everyone. Qin Tian smiled and greeted everyone. His face was brimming with sincerity. If they were just a group of negotiators, based on Zhu Huihua's trust, Qin Tian really did not put them in his eyes. However, at this moment he had no choice but to put on an act. This was closely related to the mission he had accepted. Zhu Huihua had just given him a very important mission. If he wanted to complete this mission, he needed the cooperation of Dong Chuanfu and the others in front of him. Although he did not think that this mission had a chance of success, in order to gain the most trust, he decided to take a gamble and give it a try. Being able to speak eloquently was one of Qin Tian's greatest abilities. With his intention, everyone sat together and began to talk. The topic was led in the direction of the result he wanted. At first, everyone was very happy with Qin Tian's goodwill and even his humble attitude. Some people even began to suppress their pride in their hearts. See, in other people's territory they still had to curry favor with him. Didn't this mean that Yang Xie was now so powerful that no one could be a match for him? However, as the conversation deepened, Qin Tian changed his way of speaking his thoughts and put forward his request. Everyone was speechless, and the pride that had just risen was suppressed back into the bottom of their hearts. As the leader of the 18 people, Dong Chuanfu was even more furious. He loudly rebuked, "This is simply impossible. We will never agree to this request of yours." That's right. Deputy Director Yan Lianshui, who was second only to Dong Chuanfu among the 18 people, also spoke up. If there is anything you want to discuss, you can discuss it with us. We are here on behalf of Yangxia. There are many things that Minister Dong can make the decision on. However, I don't know why you want to see Bugnam of Gojosian? You also want Bugnam of Gojosian to personally visit Yunnan Manor. Isn't it said that a gentleman does not stand under a collapsing wall? Yes, we will never agree to this. For a moment, the 18 envoys actually spoke in unison. Perhaps this was because Qin Tian's request was too excessive, but how could it not be because they all knew that they could not agree to this request, nor did they have the authority to agree to it? What kind of joke was this? Inviting Yang Qindong to enter Yunnan Manor, and not allowing him to bring more than 500 soldiers? Such excessive conditions were probably something that no one in Yangxia would agree to, right? How could they agree so easily? And even if they did agree, what would it do? Although Dong Chuanfu and the other 18 people were very afraid of death, they were more worried about the safety of their families and clansmen. If because of them, Yang Qindong was in danger and something happened to him. At that time, they were afraid that they and their families would be finished together. Not only that, but their reputations might also go down in history. That was the greatest harm to scholars. Seeing that Dong Chuanfu and the other 18 people were filled with anger, Qin Tian was not angry or anxious. All of this was within his expectations. He did not expect to be able to persuade them with his glib tongue. He came here to deliver the message. Whether it would succeed or not, he did not have much hope. Everyone don't be anxious. Since it is a negotiation, then of course it is a negotiation. To put it bluntly, we will propose conditions to each other and everyone will discuss it. Like this, as long as Bugnam of Gojosian is willing to show his sincerity and not bring more than 500 soldiers into Yunnan Manor, then we will recognize his magnanimity. Our 3 provincial kings will not only apologize to Bugnam of Gojosian for the previous misunderstanding, but also be willing to give up Guangxi, Yunnan, and Gue province. Qin Tian threw out a bomb as soon as he opened his mouth. Hearing this, Dong Chuanfu and the others were stunned. Didn't this mean that as long as Yang Qindong was willing to come personally, the problem of the 3 provinces would be easily solved and this place would become one of Yangxia's forces? Wasn't this the main purpose of Dong Chuanfu and the others coming here? Taking advantage of this moment of silence, Qin Tian continued to speak. Everyone, our 3 provincial kings have now shown their sincerity. Next, it is up to Bugnam of Gojosian. I think this matter should be reported and handed over to the higher-ups to make the final decision. I will wait here for your good news. Goodbye. Qin Tian left. However, no one paid attention to him anymore. Everyone was obviously shocked by his words. Just by showing up, Yang Qindong could make the 3 provinces under Yangxia's control without shedding any blood. This temptation was so great that Dong Chuanfu and the others could not help but swallow their saliva. It took a while for everyone to react, but Qin Tian was already nowhere to be found. Everyone's gaze fell on Dong Chuanfu. He was the head envoy and such a big matter had to be decided by him. Although no one said anything, Dong Chuanfu could see through their eyes what they were thinking. All right, let's report this matter back and let the king make the decision himself. Of course, let's not have any expectations. Dong Chuanfu was not the only one who thought this way. Qin Tian and his master Zhu Huihua were the same. They did not think that doing this would make Yang Qindong come. Because of this, after Qin Tian walked out of the diplomatic mission's courtyard, a rumor began to take root and sprout in the 3 provinces. Have you heard? The 3 provincial kings have decided to bow to Bugnam of Gojosian for the safety of the people in our 3 provinces. They only need Bugnam of Gojosian to personally come to Yunnan Manor and give him some guarantees, and he will be willing to hand over the military power of the 3 provinces. That's a good thing. Speaking of which, there's nothing wrong with the 3 provincial kings doing this. After all, they previously attacked Yunnan province and offended Bugnam of Gojosian. Now they are probably looking for an opportunity to explain themselves. Haha, this is a good thing. Doesn't this mean that the people of our 3 provinces do not need to go through the flames of war to become Yangxia people? I heard that the Han people in Yangxia have a very honorable status. That's not necessarily true. Now that the 3 provincial kings have shown their attitude, it's still unknown whether Bugnam of Gojosian will agree. Have you forgotten? Previously, someone said that the 5-star army first assassinated their king in Bangra, then used cruel methods to burn and kill many cities and people. This was all because Bangra had previously contributed to Yangxia's Myanmar province. It just so happens that the 3 provincial kings also attacked Yunnan province. Will they use the same methods on the 3 provinces under our feet? These words immediately attracted the attention of others. Someone immediately said, That's not very likely. Bugnam of Gojoseon has deep feelings for the Han people. Bangra is a foreign race. How could they use such methods on us? Chapter 1558. That might not be the case. Who can guess what the people in power want to do? As for the fact that the 3 provinces are all Han, that's true. However, there are so many Han in the world. Even if we die, the other Han will still be around. In a few years, the population will continue to increase, so it doesn't matter if the 3 provinces have us or not. Phew. Doesn't that mean that if Bugnam of Gojoseon doesn't agree to come to Yunnan Manor and accept the allegiance of the 3 provincial kings, then there will be a huge war and everyone will be in danger? You're smart, brother. That's the truth, so let's pray that Bugnam of Gojoseon will agree. If he doesn't, then it means that he wants to kill us. I will join the army and fight against the 5-star army. No matter how much they have done for the rise of the Han, if they want to kill me and my family, then they are my enemies. I will hand over the 100 gene and fight them to the death. That's right, that's what I think too. I will also mobilize my family to fight them to the end. Similar conversations continued and continued to spread. After Qin Tian received Zhu Huiying's order to deliberately spread these rumors, the news quickly swept across the 3 provinces like a gust of wind. More and more people came to know about it, and various theories and voices emerged one after another. However, from the beginning to the end, none of these conversations mentioned Zhu Huiying's request for Yang Qindong to not bring more than 500 men with him. The people were being deceived, but no one mentioned it. It was a trap in itself. This was also why Mo Gui gave Zhu Huiying the idea. It would be best if the matter was successful. When Yang Qindong brought 500 soldiers into Yunnan Manor, he would be a fish on the chopping board. However, once something happened to Yang Qindong, Yang Xie would be in chaos. At that time, who would have the time to cause trouble for Zhu Huiying? Not only that, it would also be a good opportunity for Zhu Huihua to show off his might and quickly encroach on Yang Xie's territory. If he failed, Zhu Huihua would not lose anything. On the contrary, he would have many more soldiers in his hands, and he would have more power to fight against the 5-star army. Success or failure was a good thing for him. This was also why Zhu Huichun listened to Mo Gui's advice after some hesitation. Although by doing so he would inevitably offend Yang Qindong, but even if he did not do this, how good would the result be? The rumors were still spreading. Dong Chuanfu and the others in the small courtyard were completely unaware of this. After a discussion, the 18 of them wrote a report and sent it to the telegraphist accompanying them, asking him to pass the news to Bugnam of Gojoseon. With the power of Yang Xie's intelligence department, the news of what happened in Yunnan Manor had already reached Yang Qindong's ears. Then the report written by the 18 people was sent to the desk. As the messenger, Beta Persei was naturally very familiar with the contents, so the moment he put down the telegram he said tentatively, "Young master, this is clearly Zhu Huiying's evil intentions. Don't be fooled by him." Beta Persei's words were well-founded. He had been by Yang Qindong's side for many years and understood his master well. He was a master who was not afraid of anything and loved to take risks. If this happened to other masters, Beta Persei would not be worried at all, because no one would take such a risk. However, it was completely different when it came to Yang Qindong. He really had the courage to do something unimaginable. If it was the Yang Xie of the past, with a weak foundation, small territory and small population, it would be worth taking a risk. However, Yang Xie had already grown into a towering tree. He was even stronger than the northern Ming Empire and the southern Ming Empire. Hence, such a risk had completely lost its meaning. Yes, I know. Yang Qindong smiled and looked at Beta Persei, knowing that this person was saying this for his own good. However, how could he not know that Zhu Huiying was taking a risk? If he went, he might stay there forever and even face the risk of being killed. If he did not go, the Han people of the 3 provinces would inevitably fail and become enemies with him. In this way, regardless of the outcome, the Han people would die. In this way, no matter what, it would not be worth it and he would only be the loser in the end. This was indeed a difficult choice. If he wanted to break out of this situation and obtain the ruling power of the 3 provinces at the lowest price, it seemed that the only feasible way was to take the risk. However, Qin Tian's words alone were not enough. He still needed to continue to expand the matter and use Qin Tian's mouth to make the matter a reality. Yang Qindong stood there for a long time without saying a word. Slowly, a plan began to take shape in his mind. In the small courtyard, less than half a day later, they received a personal call from Yang Qindong. After reading the contents of the report, Dong Chuanfu and the other 18 people, in addition to sighing in admiration of their king's boldness, also learned about what had happened outside and the rumors that Qin Tian had spread. Qin Tian is a despicable person, Yan Lianshui said angrily. That's right, he is a despicable person. However, in the face of a gentleman like our king, he can only give in. Men, tell the soldiers guarding us that we want to see Qin Tian. We have something important to tell him. At this moment, Dong Xuanfu was full of energy. After receiving Yang Qindong's personal telegram, he had more confidence when he spoke. After the soldiers guarding the courtyard heard Dong Xuanfu's request, they did not dare to delay and immediately reported it to Qin Tian. Qin Tian was also very curious about the five-star army's decision so quickly. He led a group of soldiers back to the small courtyard and saw Dong Xuanfu and the others who had been waiting there for a long time. Duke Qin, our king, has already replied. He welcomes and is gratified that the three provincial kings are willing to submit to our Yang Xie. As for the three provincial kings' request to meet my great king in the city, I have also agreed. Dong Xuanfu's voice was not soft. He looked completely different from when they met in the morning. He looked much more energetic. He actually agreed? Qin Tian, who was originally a little absent-minded, was stunned. He originally thought that Bugnam of Gojoseon would definitely point out that this was a conspiracy and reprimand them. As such, they only needed to prepare for the upcoming battle. Then they would make good use of the newly won people's hearts. There was still a possibility of a battle. However, when Dong Xuanfu said that Yang Qindong had agreed, Qin Tian felt that his brain was not enough to process it. Could he really agree to this? Could it be that he did not know that this was a conspiracy? Could it be that he did not know that once Bugnam of Gojoseon came to Yunnan Manor, it would be equivalent to an eagle being locked in a cage and would not have the chance to spread its wings and soar? Could it be that he did not know that this was a dangerous journey? At this moment, countless thoughts appeared in Qin Tian's mind. He was increasingly unable to understand Yang Qindong's actions. It was not until Dong Xuanfu intentionally coughed that Qin Tian was pulled back to reality from his fantasy. Oh, but I wonder if there are any other conditions? Out of instinct he asked. Yes, our king does have conditions. Dong Xuanfu nodded. As expected. Qin Tian's heart skipped a beat. He did not believe that Yang Qindong would jump in despite knowing the truth of the matter. He had even thought about what the other party's request would be. It must be to bring more soldiers. For example, the 500 followers would be replaced by 50,000. With the powerful combat strength of the five-star army, if these 50,000 were all elite troops, it would be very difficult to touch him in Yunnan Manor. Qin Tian already had a judgment in his heart. He was even prepared to reject the other party's request for 50,000 people because it would threaten the safety of the three provincial kings. He opened his mouth and said, "But I don't know what the conditions are. Why don't you tell me?" Qin Tian just wanted to see how Dong Xuanfu and the others would perform. He didn't agree to it, but he wanted to see how Dong Xuanfu and the others would perform. Looking at Qin Tian, Dong Xuanfu did not think too much. Instead, his voice was loud as he said righteously, "Previously, there were some rumors in the city that were unfavorable to our king. I think it must have come from your mouth, so our king cannot believe you." It's coming. Qin Tian thought in his heart. However, he did not stop him. Instead, he wanted to watch Dong Xuanfu continue his performance. He only needed to wait for the other party to finish speaking before he would completely deny it. At this time, Dong Xuanfu was still talking to himself. Who knows if the three provincial kings will do anything else? In order to dispel our king's concerns and to make the truth of the matter public, you only need to send out official documents to the people of the three provinces. Tell them that the three provincial kings intend to submit to our king. Everything will wait until our king enters Yunnan Manor. After ensuring his safety, the authority of the three provinces will be handed over. Then Bugnam of Gojoseon will come here and take over everything. No, that's too much. Qin Tian didn't even pay attention to what Dong Xuanfu was saying and directly denied it. Then with an angry look, he snorted coldly and said, "This is simply because Wunan king doesn't trust my king. If that's the case, is there still a need to negotiate?" Not only were Dong Xuanfu and the 17 members of the diplomatic mission stunned by Qin Tian's words, but even the personal guards behind Qin Tian were stunned. They did not understand how their master's words had anything to do with Dong Xuanfu's request. At this time, Qin Tian also felt that something was wrong. This could be seen from the faces of Dong Xuanfu and the others. Out of the corner of his eyes, he glanced at the bodyguards beside him. When he saw that they were also looking at him in surprise, he knew that this was bad. Obviously, Dong Xuanfu wasn't talking about how many soldiers he would bring into Southern Cloud Manor. He forced a smile and said, "I'm sorry, Minister Dong. I've been busy recently, so I was distracted by other things. I will have to trouble you to say it again." Chapter 1559. Although Dong Chuanfu was puzzled by Qin Tian's behavior, he did not think too much about it and repeated what he had just said. This time Qin Tian could be said to have heard it very clearly. Because of this he was very surprised. With just this request, Yang Qindong would bring 500 followers into Yunnan Manor? Was he not worried about his own safety? Puzzled, he repeated his question. Just this one request? Yes. Just this one request. But these notices must be posted all over the streets and alleys of the 3 provinces so that all the people know about this. At that time, my king will come to Yunnan Manor and give the 3 provincial kings a chance to turn over a new leaf. Dong Chuanfu raised his head and said proudly, "Look, this was their king." The so-called danger was nothing in his eyes at all. Just this boldness alone was something they could never learn. Okay, no problem. Qin Tian agreed immediately. He just wanted to spread the news and let the people of the 3 provinces know. But what was the use of this? To threaten the people? At that time, ordinary people did not have any status. Often, when the noblemen and officials said that the country was prosperous and the people were at peace, they were referring to the scholars and the noble families because they were often with the noblemen. In the eyes of the noblemen, if these people were satisfied, then the people of the world would be satisfied. Because of this, Qin Tian really did not know the use of Yang Qindong's request. So what if the people of the 3 provinces were at his beck and call? Could these people turn the world upside down? The result of this meeting was a happy ending. After Qin Tian left, he went to see Zhu Huiyun and told him about Dong Chuanfu and the others, or rather Yang Qindong's request. The 3 provincial kings were very happy to hear it. Aha, great news, great news. As long as Yang Qindong enters Yunnan Manor, he will be the prey in our eyes. He will not be able to turn the world upside down. At that time we will be able to use the emperor to order his vassals. No matter how big the territory and how much wealth, it will be ours. Qin Gong, let's go and settle this matter immediately. In order to prevent any undue delay, this matter has to be done quickly. Also, send someone to keep an eye on Yunnan Manor to prevent this Bugnam of Gojosian from secretly sending people into the city. Yang Qindong's strength, although Zhu Huitu didn't experience it too much, but looking at the opponents he dealt with, he knew that this person was very powerful. In order to prevent the other party from playing any tricks in the dark, he had to strengthen his control over Southern Cloud Manor, especially in terms of military force. As for public opinion, Zhu Huichen really didn't care. As long as he had money, food and soldiers, ordinary people would have to look up to him. After getting a positive answer, Qin Tian went to work with a face full of joy. Once Zhu Huichen really became a great emperor, he would have the power to meddle with Yang Xie. His status would inevitably rise, and some of his ambitions would be realized. It was very likely that he would be remembered in history. No one cared about public opinion, but only Yang Qindong was very clear about the importance of public opinion. Yang Qindong had some headaches about Yunnan, Guizhou and Guangxi. These were the ancestral lands of the Han people. It was impossible to deal with them like dealing with other forces. After taking over these places, he couldn't forcibly move them out. That would be criticized behind his back. Yang Qindong didn't care about what they said about the foreign races, but for the Han people, their position was naturally different. If possible, of course, he would want to solve the problem here in a peaceful way. Thus, Zhu Huichen came up with this move. Although it seemed that this place was abnormally dangerous, but wasn't it an opportunity for him? If he did it well, he could righteously take over the 3 provinces, and the people here wouldn't have any resistance. In this way the big problem would be solved. Since that was the case, why would he not agree? As for what kind of danger would there be in Yunnan Manor, Yang Qindong, who had Datsong, really didn't care too much. If they wanted to deal with him, those people had to have the ability to do so. Of course, because of Datsong, Yang Qindong was full of confidence, but others didn't know. After learning the details of Yang Qindong's telegram to Dong Chuanfu, Yang Xie was in an uproar. First, it was the 2 commanders of the 2nd and 4th divisions of the Lung Feng army, followed by the 1st Cavalry Army's commander Tian Hu, and the new army's commander Su He. Then, a group of officials in the first city and the people in charge of the provinces and regions also sent telegrams to inquire about this matter. At the same time, they also advised their king not to be impulsive. In this regard, Yang Qindong just smiled and accepted the concern of these people. Then he did something that made everyone exclaim. A personally written telegram was sent to Chichen City, establishing his eldest son Yang Bo as the prince and establishing his identity as the legitimate heir. On the issue of establishing the successor, there were already many people who had spoken up. After all, Yang Qindong was different from other monarchs. He was a master who always liked to rush to the front line, and danger could be discovered at any time. It was true that Yang Bo was the eldest son, and he was also the son of Queen Hu Yen. No matter how one looked at it, he was the best choice to be the successor. However, without any instructions, anything could happen. As the saying goes, if the name is not correct, the words will not go smoothly. Yu Qian thought that even if he couldn't see the day when the Han people unified the world, his son and grandson had to see it and participate in it. But now, just as the hope was getting bigger and bigger, Yang Qindong wanted to take the initiative to take the risk, so how could he let it go? If Yang Qindong hadn't sent a telegram to Yang Wu and Deputy City Lord Luan Shaoqian in Crimson City to keep an eye on Yu Qian, he probably would have already boarded a ship and rushed over. Even so, Yu Qian still sent 3 telegrams a day to express his determination and also warned Yang Qindong not to take the risk. The public opinion could be fought for in the future, but he couldn't take the risk and regret it for the rest of his life. Imperial Palace of Crimson City. Yang Bo, who was already 10 years old, had already grown into a handsome young man. Ever since his father left Crimson City 6 years ago, he had not returned. In other words, Yang Bo, who was already 10 years old, had not seen his father for more than 6 years. However, this did not affect the glorious image of Yang Qindong in his heart. Putting aside everything else, in the past 6 years, Yang Qindong had restored the Far Eastern province and taken down Eastern Europe and Central Asia. He had destroyed countless countries and increased the wealth, territory and population of the Yangtze. It wouldn't be long before news of a great victory came from the front. When the little Yang Bo heard this, he felt a sense of pride and glory. From how he saw it, this was why his father was so amazing, and he felt proud to have such a father. With his father as his role model, Yang Bo did not live a pampered life because of his status as the crown prince. On the contrary, he worked even harder than the children of other families. He studied and learned how to wield his saber, and he had done some research on firearms. As the Empress Mother, Hu Yen naturally gave her full support. Whatever Yang Bo wanted to learn, the top talents in the entire Crimson City could be his teachers, allowing him to ask any questions he wanted. With great support, Yang Bo was more opinionated than his peers, and he was also more mature. He had always thought that he had to work hard so that when his father returned to Crimson City, he would be praised by his father. He wanted to enjoy the fatherly love and praise that only children could enjoy. Chapter 1560. But now, a document had spread to every province in Yangtze. He had become a prince and the first in line to inherit the throne. After knowing what this meant from his teacher, Yang Qindong was not only unhappy, but he personally wrote a telegram and sent it to Yang Qindong. The meaning was not complicated. As a son, he missed his father. He wanted to see his father and enjoy the joy that Yang Qindong brought him when he touched his little head. As a son, he didn't want his father to take risks, because his father was his everything. As the son of a king and a possible king in the future, he understood his father's approach. He wished his father a triumphant return and would wait for his safe return. But if things did not work out, he would take the initiative to start everything and fulfill Yang Qindong's wish to let the Han people stand at the top of the world. This telegram was respectfully sent to Yang Qindong by Beta Persei. After reading the contents of the telegram, Yang Qindong had mixed feelings. He sighed in his heart. His son had finally grown up. She couldn't help but murmur in her heart, don't worry. Your father won't be in trouble so easily. I will lead you to a higher peak. I will watch you get married and have children. I will watch the day you rule this world. Order, prepare to set off for Yunnan Manor. At this moment, Yang Qindong's face was full of high spirits. He wanted to set an example for his son. He wanted to make everything impossible possible. According to the news, the kings of the 3 provinces had already posted notices, stating that as long as King Wu Nan Yang Qindong was willing to condescend to the Southern Cloud Manor, the king of the 3 provinces, Zhu Huixian, would be moved by his sincerity. The 3 provinces might surrender without a fight and become part of Yang Qindong's territory. When the notice was posted, the local people were overjoyed. They had long heard about the treatment of the Han people in Yangtze's territory. Not only did everyone have a grain field, but they were also given houses to live in. Those with skills could also work in factories to earn money. It was said that many people who went there first not only did not have enough food at home but also had meat on the table during the new year. All of this was undoubtedly a fairy-like life for the ordinary people. If it was not because they were too far away or because the village officials and officials at all levels were too strict, they would have fled and sought refuge. Now they could become a member of Yangxia without moving and enjoy all kinds of good policies. All of the people were naturally overjoyed and looked forward to Bugnam of Gojoseon's appearance in Yunnan Manor. Of course, most of the people did not think that Yang Qindong would be a threat once he entered the territory of the three provinces. From their point of view, Bugnam of Gojoseon, who could destroy the Mongolians and the surrounding foreign tribes, moved into Yunnan Manor. It was the same as returning to his own home. How could there be any danger? On the contrary, if Bugnam of Gojoseon did not come, it would mean that he did not want them and their lives would be in danger. In order to survive, they had to work hard to become the three provinces' army and fight against the five-star army on the battlefield. It had to be said that Zhu Huiyu had the upper hand in public opinion this time. He was now using public opinion to threaten Yang Qindong and force him to take the risk to come to Yunnan Manor. Yang Qindong, who knew everything, could not think of a way to solve the problem, so he decided to take the risk this time. Naturally, this risk was very dangerous in the eyes of others, but in Yang Qindong's eyes, it was not a big deal. If he was forced into a corner, he could use the big warehouse. But before he was at the end of his rope, it was better not to expose his bottom line. He would not forget that from all kinds of clues, there was a pair of eyes staring at him in the dark. And before he found the traitor, it was best not to use his trump card. This was equivalent to an additional insurance. If he did not want to use the big warehouse, the 500 people who came this time must be carefully selected. Of course, Yang Er volunteered himself and insisted on following him. Next was the 2,000 Black Cavalry, the Lung brothers, and the self-proclaimed elite warriors of the world's first cavalry army. However, there were only 500 people to follow. Even if the Black Cavalry had 2,000 people, how could there be anyone else's turn? Out of 2,000 people, only 500 could be brought. With a ratio of 4-to-1, all the Black Cavalry wanted to join. In their hearts, it was all thanks to Yang Qindong that they could have a good life and social status now. Now that their master needed them, of course, they would not shirk their responsibility. Yang Qindong handed this difficult matter to Beta Persei to handle. He believed that this Yang family servant would do his best to protect his safety. If that was the case, who would he bring along? He must be more nervous than himself. Beta Persei also lived up to Yang Qindong's expectations. After getting the power to choose the soldiers, he called for 2,000 Black Cavalry and held an internal martial arts competition in a small area. The first 500 people could follow. As for the others, if they did not seize the opportunity, then sorry, they could only stay here quietly. In the afternoon, 500 of the most elite Black Cavalry were selected. Beta Persei immediately transferred a batch of firearms to them. Then, under the worried eyes of the 5-star army generals, they went straight from Beijiang Prefecture to Yunnan Prefecture under the banner of Bugnam of Gojoseon. After Yang Qindong arrived at Beijiang Prefecture, Wang Zhanjiang, one of the 3 provincial generals outside the city, retreated with his army. He came on this trip full of confidence. The army of 150,000 looked like they were bound to invade the entire Vietnamese province. In Wang Zhanjiang's mind, he suddenly appeared in Vietnamese province and had the advantage of military strength. Even if he could not conquer the entire Vietnamese province, he could at least occupy half of it. However, he did not expect that Beijiang Prefecture alone would be able to stop him here. With the cooperation of the 1st Division of the Cold Front Division, he did not gain the slightest advantage no matter how hard he tried. He also did not see any hope of attacking the city. Therefore, when Yang Qindong appeared with the main army, he turned around and fled. Wang Zhanjiang's luck was very bad. When he led his troops back to Langsun, he was heavily injured by Cheng Hu of the 1st Division of the Cold Front Division, causing him to flee like a stray dog. On the way back, in order to make himself look less miserable, he even ordered his Kiliarchs to capture many able-bodied men from nearby villages to supplement the army. However, what he did not know was that among the able-bodied men he captured, 2,000 of them were from the 1st Division of the Cold Front Division. One by one, they disguised themselves as ordinary people and were scattered all over the place. Then they were caught and found by the 3 provinces' army and brought back to the Southern Cloud Mansion in a grand manner. Although these 2,000 men were scattered among the various armies, they were already prepared. As long as Cheng Hu, as the commander, gave the order, they would immediately gather and do more things. The existence of these people was also one of the trump cards that Yang Qindong dared to enter Yunnan Prefecture. Since both sides had reached a temporary truce agreement, Yang Qindong had already set off for Yunnan Prefecture with 500 black cavalry. Naturally, they did not encounter any obstacles along the way. Moreover, the armies and officials of the three provincial kings would come out to greet them as a sign of friendship. This allowed Yang Qindong and his troops to get closer and closer to Yunnan Prefecture. In Yunnan Prefecture. At this moment, Zhu Huichuan's face was flushed and he was extremely excited. Previously, when he heard Mo Gui's suggestion, he did not think it was feasible. At least, if he was Yang Qindong, he would never take the risk to come to Yunnan Prefecture. Since he had a good chance of winning, why would he take the risk? However, Yang Qindong actually agreed and even appointed his eldest son Yang Bo as the prince. This meant that he was ready to break the hatchet and sink the boat. When Zhu Huichu thought about how long it would take for Yang Qindong to appear in front of him and even be controlled by him, then he might indirectly control the entire Yang family. His heart began to beat faster and faster, and it didn't slow down. In his excitement, he secretly mobilized the elite forces in his hands to get closer to Yunnan Prefecture. What he needed to do was to wait for Yang Qindong to enter the city and find the right opportunity to control him for his own use. In order to successfully complete this mission, he continuously mobilized the elite forces under him from the provinces and gathered outside Yunnan Prefecture. At the same time, he also sent out a large number of scouts to pay attention to the main forces of the five-star army in the south of Langsun. Once he found out that they were acting strangely, he would use Yang Qindong as an excuse to immediately send troops to attack and take the initiative first. However, from the information he received so far, the main forces of the five-star army were very obedient. They seemed to believe that Yang Qindong could succeed in the peace talks and did not have the slightest intention of moving to the three provinces. This made Zhu Huichun feel relieved, but at the same time, he cursed the stupidity of the five-star army in his heart. 10 days later, when he learned that Yang Qindong and his 500 men were less than 3 days away from Yunnan Prefecture, Zhu Huichun called a group of his confidants to a secret room to discuss and perfect the military plan. Other than his number one think tank, Qin Tian, there were 4 of his generals present. They were General Meng Ning, General Wu Yingtu, General Zhang Jiang, and General Kai Wenju. Over the years, Zhu Huichun had been constantly developing and expanding his strength and had gathered a group of capable people. For example, these 4 generals were one of them. There was also General Luo Guan who guarded Yunnan, General Jiang Wuqing who guarded Guangxi, and General Bai Kuan who guarded Guangxi. In the secret room, the 6 of them met and Zhu Huichun took the lead to announce the final plan, which was how to capture Yang Qindong alive and not kill him. Of course, if Yang Qindong died, Yangxia would fall into chaos. However, for the sake of benefits, Zhu Huichun did not want to see a chaotic Yangxia. What he wanted was to use them for his own purposes. Even if he could not take over all of Yangxia's territory, if he could take over a third of it, it would be a land that was much larger than the Great Ming Dynasty. Chapter 1561. Unless absolutely necessary, don't kill him. In the secret chamber, Zhu Huihua made the final decision. The other 5 people nodded one after another. After each of them described the situation on their side, Qin Tian finally said, "Your Majesty, there are 2 more things to report to you." "Speak." Seeing that Qin Tian was so formal, Zhu Huihua's attitude was also extremely serious. "Your Majesty, our people have noticed that the Shiping King's Mu family has been very active recently. I'm afraid that they will become one of the uncertain factors." Qin Tian reported the discovery of the Mu family as a big matter. The other party had been operating in Yunnan for many years. Their influence were spread far and wide. It was not something that could be wiped out in a few years. If they jumped out to cause trouble at the crucial time, it would cause problems. Zhu Huihua frowned first, then quickly relaxed and said, "It's fine. They will not cooperate with Yang Qindong. They would rather this person die here. We just need to keep an eye on them." This was not wrong at all. Yang Qindong was Zhu Huihua's enemy, so how could he not be the enemy of the southern Ming Empire? The Mu family had been indebted to the Great Ming Empire for generations. If there was a chance to eliminate Yang Qindong, the biggest threat to the Great Ming Empire, they would not let it go easily. Therefore, most of the people from the Mu family came to kill Yang Qindong, and it was impossible for them to save people. Since Zhu Huihua said that he knew about this matter, Qin Tian did not say anything more. Both sides made the final arrangements regarding Yang Qindong's arrival. If they could not capture Yang Qindong alive, then they could only kill him. No matter what, this time they would not allow Yang Qindong to leave Yunnan Manor alive. The news that Yang Qindong was coming to Yunnan Manor to negotiate with Zhu Huihua and peacefully take over Yun, Guang and Gui provinces had long been spread among the people. In order to witness this great moment, all the Han people in Yunnan Manor were looking forward to it. Even the people in the surrounding towns were waiting for good news. To them, there was no better news than being able to survive a calamity without going through a war. After all, the people who would suffer the most in the chaos of war would be the people. 3 days later, outside the southern city gate of Yunnan Manor, Qin Tianjing led a group of people to welcome the arrival of Yang Qindong's team. Zhu Huichen did not appear. Instead, he used the excuse that he was not feeling well to hide. This was what he had to be careful about. Mo Gui also reminded him that Yang Qindong was a very powerful person. He didn't act according to common sense. Don't get kidnapped as soon as you see him. If that happened, you would suffer a double loss. Regarding this, Zhu Huilu deeply agreed. In order to prevent Yang Qindong from having the opportunity to deal with or capture him alive, before the situation was under control, he would not meet with Yang Qindong. This time he only sent Qin Tian as his representative. Yang Qindong's team came from afar. They were all dressed in black armor and black horses. Every one of the black cavalry had a saber at their waist and a firearm on their back. When the 500 people lined up neatly, they gave off the feeling of a magnificent army. He had long heard of the legends of the Black Cavalry's ability to fight, but he had never seen it before. He thought that the world had exaggerated their abilities. But when they faced each other, Qin Tian felt a strong murderous aura rushing towards him. At this moment his expression changed greatly. He couldn't help but think to himself, it's only 500 Black Cavalry, but they already give off the feeling of a magnificent army. It's invincible. If there were 2,000 Black Cavalry, even if he sent out 20 or 30,000 people, he wouldn't be able to cause any damage to the enemy in a short time. Thank goodness, thank goodness. We only agreed on 500 people. It seems like Yang Qindong is also abiding by the rules. Qin Tian said in his heart, thank goodness, thank goodness. With a smile on his face, he quickly led his men to welcome them. Yang Qindong was no stranger to Qin Tian. They had interacted many times before. Thus he recognized him from afar. But when he didn't see Zhu Huilio's figure, Yang Qindong deliberately pretended to be unhappy and asked, what's wrong? The 3 provincial kings didn't come? Although all of this was within his expectations, Zhu Huilu wouldn't easily show himself and wouldn't give him a chance to capture the king first. However, he still had to show his anger. Seeing Yang Qindong's sullen face, Qin Tian didn't know why, but his heart couldn't help but beat faster. He hurriedly bowed and said, I'm really sorry. My king has been having a stomachache since last night. He hasn't recovered yet, so I can only come to welcome him. But please don't worry, Bugnam of Gojoseon. Once my king recovers, he will immediately come to see you. With an apologetic look, when Yang Qindong looked at him, Qin Tian couldn't help but avoid his eyes. After all, he was lying, so he was somewhat lacking in confidence. How could Yang Qindong not know that Qin Tian wasn't telling the truth? However, if he turned around and left because of this, it would be making a mountain out of a molehill. Moreover, he originally planned to enter Yunnan Manor. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to carry out his plans one by one. Alright, then please send my regards to the health of the 3 provincial kings. This king hopes to see him as soon as possible so that we can discuss the matters of the 3 provinces as soon as possible. Yes, Bugnam of Gojoseon's intentions, this official will definitely pass on your message to my king. Then can we enter the city now? There are many people in the city waiting to see Bugnam of Gojoseon. Seeing that the matter was over, Qin Tian hurriedly changed the topic. Hearing that the people were lining the streets to welcome him, Yang Qindong's face lit up with joy. That's right, this king is really happy that the people are so fond of him. I'll have to trouble Lord Qin to lead the way. You're too kind. This is what I should do. Bugnam of Gojoseon, please. Qin Tian chuckled. After bowing and making an inviting gesture, he immediately turned around and walked in front. When he turned around, he intentionally looked at the armored general who was following beside him. This person was Wang Zhanjiang. On the surface, he was in charge of the safety of Yang Qindong's group. However, in reality he was observing if there was a suitable opportunity to make a move. When Qin Tian was welcoming Yang Qindong, he was observing from the side. However, the result disappointed him. From the performance of the 500 Black Cavalry, Yang Qindong was tightly protected in the middle. If he had to make a move forcefully, not only would he not be able to gain any advantage, he might even let the other party escape in the chaos. This would greatly disappoint the king's expectations. Without even a 20% chance of success, Wang Zhanjiang naturally wouldn't make a move so easily. He decided to wait for Yang Qindong to enter the city before making a move. No matter what, it was easier to enter the city than to leave. At that time the initiative would be in his hands. He inconspicuously shook his head, telling Qin Tian that the opportunity wasn't ripe yet. Qin Tian nodded his head discreetly, indicating that he understood. Then he strode into the southern cloud manor. The two sides of the streets in the city were already filled with Han commoners who came to watch the show. In the past they had only heard of how powerful Bugnam of Gojoseon was. There were even rumors that he had 3 heads and 6 arms. However, no one had actually seen what he looked like. Now that there was a chance to see his true appearance, who would be willing to let go of such an opportunity? Regarding the commoners in the city who were surrounding the two sides of the street, Zhu Huiyun and his subordinates discussed and didn't disperse them. After all, the commoners were the most insignificant existence to them. They didn't care about the so-called true public opinion. If they wanted to watch, then they could come and watch. This way Yang Qindong would lower his guard. After all, with so many commoners watching, the other party would definitely think that they were sincere in negotiating. This would be beneficial to them. However, Zhu Huiyun didn't even think about it. He didn't even dare to go out of the city to welcome them. This already proved that he lacked confidence. How could Yang Qindong easily believe him? However, he was happy to see the commoners of the 3 provinces because he had already prepared gifts for these commoners. Yang Qindong entered the city. In front of him was Qin Tian and his men. They were responsible for opening the way and ensuring the safety along the way. Every 2 steps, there was a soldier from the 3 provinces guarding the place. They looked as if they were facing a great enemy. However, they weren't targeting the 5-star army, but the people from Shiping King's Mu family. They were afraid that their appearance would disrupt their king's plan. Yang Qindong entering the city was equivalent to entering Zhu Huiyun's pot. How he wanted to see it all depended on his mood. However, if Yang Qindong died here at this time, it wouldn't meet the conditions for him to maximize his benefits. Therefore, they could only guard against the Mu family's army. It was reasonable for the soldiers on the street to be so nervous. Although Qin Tian was walking in front, his attention was always on the people behind him. When he saw Yang Qindong entering the city under the protection of 500 black cavalry, he breathed a long sigh of relief. He was worried that the other party would leave without even entering the city gate. In that case, all the plans would be child's play. But now, the other party had entered the city, and everything that followed was no longer up to the other party. The black cavalry entered the city. Yang Qindong, who was riding on the only white horse, the White Dragon, was greeted by the curious gazes of the commoners. At that moment he also put a smile on his face, showing a refreshing appearance. But his lips moved slightly. Beta Persei, you can move now. Come on, it's time to distribute the flyers. In the future, everyone will be a family. After joining the Yangxie, all Han people must first apply for an identity certificate. Then, with the identity certificate, each person can receive 20 mu of fertile land. Not only that, with the proof of Han nationality, whether it's farming, business, or other things, you can be exempted from 30% of the tax. If you are willing to go to other provinces under the Yangxie, you can get more fertile land ranging from 50 mu to 100 mu. Chapter 1562. Come everyone, take a look. With your identity as a Han citizen, you can buy rice, grain and oil at a 20% discount in Yangxie's territory in the future. Shouts and cries rang out one after another. The black cavalry, who were already prepared, took out the printed flyers and handed them to the commoners on the streets. In an instant, many of the commoners had such leaflets in their hands. Although some of them were illiterate, they could understand the language. When they heard the descriptions from the Black Knight Dragon Guards, their eyes were already dazzled. They looked at the leaflet in their hands and carefully put it away. They decided to go back and find someone who could read to listen to what was written on it. The Black Cavalry Dragon Guard's actions were truly beyond Qin Tian and the others' expectations. Wang Zhanjiang's eyes widened as he leaned closer to Qin Tian and whispered, "Lord Qin, do you need us to go and stop these people?" How could Qin Tian not know that Yang Qindong was trying to win the hearts of the people? However, a little impatience would spoil a great plan. There were so many people on the streets. If they were to make a move, the consequences would be unpredictable. If Yang Qindong were to escape in the chaos, then the loss would outweigh the gain. Qin Tian, who did not dare to take the risk, could only grit his teeth and say, "Let them distribute. As long as something happens to Bugnam of Gojoseon, these flyers will naturally be useless. It's fine." Just like that, without anyone stopping them, the 500 black cavalry's bulging chests quickly deflated. The 100,000 flyers were all distributed. Yang Qindong smiled with satisfaction. He believed that after these policies were made known to the people, there would be a huge change in the hearts of the people in the 3 provinces. This would be very helpful in promoting the subsequent takeover of this place. It could be said that the first thing he did after entering the city was successfully completed. Finally, after passing through the long street, under the guidance of Qin Tian and the others, they finally arrived at a relatively independent courtyard with 4 entrances. Apart from a courtyard, there were no other buildings in the area. It was very quiet. Along the way, no one came out to cause trouble. The Mu family members who originally wanted to jump out also restrained their impulse to make a move. Perhaps they also knew that under the protection of a large number of soldiers from the 3 provinces, Yang Qindong also had the extremely elite 500 black cavalry by his side to protect him. In addition, there were so many people on this street. Forcefully making a move would not gain the slightest advantage. "Bugnam of Gojoseon, this is the resting place that my king has prepared for you. Since there are too many of you, the 3-section courtyard nearby will also be given to you. Are you satisfied with that?" Qin Tian asked with a smile. From his expression, there was not a trace of hostility. "Not bad, I'm satisfied." Yang Qindong smiled and nodded. Beta Persei, who was standing at the side, shouted, "Dao Xiao Ba Dao Jiang, lead the team in to investigate." Immediately, the 200 black cavalry dismounted and entered. After about a quarter of an hour, the 2 captains walked out and nodded at Beta Persei. Qin Tian was not surprised to see the black cavalry being so careful. He would not hide anyone in this courtyard. He did not think that such a lowly method would be able to take down Yang Qindong. Of course, it was not that he did not do anything. He also believed that Yang Qindong would be able to see through it, but there was nothing he could do. "Bugnam of Gojoseon, you must be tired after such a long journey. Why don't you take a rest first? After that, someone will send food and drinks. Everything will wait for my king to recover before starting the peace talks immediately. Is that okay?" Seeing that the matter was settled, Qin Tian cupped his hands and prepared to leave. "Thank you for your trouble, Master Qin. I won't see you out." Yang Qindong still had a smile on his face. "I wouldn't dare. Goodbye." After Qin Tian said this, he turned to General Wang Zhanjiang and said, "Leave 1,000 soldiers outside the courtyard. They must ensure the safety of Bugnam of Gojoseon. Without orders, no one is allowed to approach this place. Otherwise they will be killed without mercy." "Please rest assured, Master Qin." Wang Zhanjiang replied happily. When Yang Qindong heard this, the smile on his face grew wider. This was clearly an act for him. On the surface, it was to protect them, but in reality, it was just to monitor them. After saying this, Qin Tian turned to look at Yang Qindong and said with a smile, "This humble official will take his leave." "Well said, well said. By the way, I will have to trouble you to send Dong Chuanfu and the others out of the city. Since I am here, there is no need for him to stay here." Yang Qindong made a timely request. Compared to Yang Qindong's importance, Dong Chuanfu was not even worth a fart. Qin Tian did not want to go against Yang Qindong over such a small matter, so he immediately nodded and agreed. After Qin Tian left, Yang Qindong also entered the courtyard. Then he saw Beta Persei saying with an indignant expression, "Young master, this humble one just took a look. There are 2 courtyards and a total of 6 doors. 2 of them are front doors, 2 back doors and 2 side doors. This is really not easy to defend. Why didn't the other party find us a large courtyard with 5 courtyards? Why did they have to put together 2 courtyards? This is clearly to create a loophole in our defense." Looking at Beta Persei's angry expression, Yang Qindong waved his hand and said, "Just take care of the main courtyard. As for the rest, we will wait and see." How could Yang Qindong not see through the other party's tricks? If Yang Qindong was 99% sure that Zhu Huitong had ulterior motives towards him before, he was 100% sure now. Since that was the case, there was no point in saying more. Everything depended on their own means. "It seems that the other party doesn't want me dead, but wants me alive. Interesting, his appetite is really big." Yang Qindong muttered to himself as Beta Persei left to make arrangements. He was very curious about how the other party would target him. He also wanted to see how long the other party could endure. After Qin Tian left the courtyard, He arranged for someone to let Dong Chuanfu and the others leave. Then he strode towards the king's mansion of the 3 provinces. Zhu Huitong could no longer calm down and was pacing back and forth in the hall. When he saw Qin Tian, he asked nervously, "How is it?" "Congratulations, Your Majesty. Bugnam of Gojoseon has fallen into the trap. He has now been arranged to stay in the courtyard. General Wang Zhanjiang is waiting there with his men." As he spoke, Qin Tian began to talk about the situation along the way in detail from the moment he saw Yang Qindong. Zhu Huitong didn't care about the leaflets in the city promoting the Yang Xie policy at all. Yang Qindong couldn't even protect himself, so how could the policy be implemented? It was just a pie in the sky. There was nothing to be afraid of. What he cared about was that Yang Qindong had entered the city and lived in a courtyard with 6 doors. This would also determine whether the initiative was completely in his hands. Good, very good. After hearing that Yang Qindong had entered the courtyard, Zhu Huitong was so excited that his face flushed red. Then he paced back and forth in the hall and said, "Qin Gongong, if we take action tonight, what are the chances of success?" If we capture a dead Yang Qindong, there wouldn't be any problem. After all, there are only 500 of them. However, if we want to capture him alive, it will be difficult." Qin Tian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he thought for a while before saying this. "No, this is such a good opportunity. Of course we have to capture Yang Qindong alive." Zhu Huitong shook his head. With such a good opportunity, if they only let Yang Qindong die, they wouldn't be able to maximize the benefits. This was obviously not what he wanted. "Qin Gongong, do you think we can think of something with the food? For example, poison?" "We can't. If we can think of this method, the other party will definitely think of it as well. They must have prepared many methods to check the food we send. Once they find out, they will definitely fight to the death. Unless it's absolutely necessary, it's best not to do this." Qin Tian hurriedly shook his head. The Black Knight Dragon Guards were elites. How could something as simple as poisoning really make things difficult for the other party? Yes. This king didn't think it through. Zhu Huitong knew that he was too agitated and didn't think carefully enough. Then, according to Qin Gongong, what should we do? Qin Tian was already prepared for this. When faced with this question, he almost immediately answered. "Your Majesty, Yang Qindong has just arrived, so he will definitely be on high alert. It's not appropriate to attack blindly. However, we can give it a try. For example." Qin Tian muttered into Zhu Huitong's ear. Zhu Huitong nodded continuously as he listened, his face glowing with excitement. In the courtyard, Yang Qindong sat in the main hall, reading a biography in his hand. This was the only copy that one of his subordinates found. It recorded some of the experiences and descriptions of the mountains and rivers written by a person named Wang Pu after his travels. There were many records about the 3 provinces. In the future, this place would become one of his territories. Of course, Yang Qindong had to know more about it. When Beta Persei finished arranging everything and entered the main hall, he secretly admired Yang Qindong in his heart when he saw him sitting there quietly reading a book. At this time, his young master was still calm. It was no wonder that he could conquer such a huge country. Seeing that Yang Qindong was reading, Beta Persei turned to leave. However, Yang Qindong spoke at this time. "Beta Persei, empty the row of rooms in the backyard. Someone will send something later. Just leave it there." "Something? What is it?" Beta Persei asked in confusion. He didn't receive any notice. This was Yunnan Manor, not Yangxie's territory. How could someone send something here? Yang Qindong suddenly raised his head and looked at Beta Persei. That gaze made Beta Persei's heart tighten. He suddenly thought that it must be an extremely confidential matter. His question just now was obviously superfluous. He immediately said, "Yes, young master. I'll arrange for someone to empty that place." Chapter 1563. After he finished speaking, Beta Persei turned around and left after seeing that Yang Qindong had no intention of saying anything else. Leaving Yang Qindong alone in the main hall, he let out a sigh of relief. Of course, he would not let anyone else know about the secret of Datsong, not even Beta Persei. Yang Qindong was very clear about the principle that if the emperor did not keep the secret, he would lose his minister, and if the minister did not keep the secret, he would lose his chastity. Ever since the king of Bangla was assassinated, he always had a feeling that an invisible net was covering his head, and he always felt that someone was watching him in the dark. Although he had wanted to trace the origin of this feeling, unfortunately there was nothing because this was just a feeling he had. However, Yang Qindong believed this feeling without any evidence. And before he found the traitor, he would not easily trust anyone. Of course, he believed in people like Beta Persei who followed him all the time, but he could not guarantee that the people around Beta Persei were reliable. In order to reduce the complications, it was better not to tell anyone. As for the row of houses in the backyard, Yang Qindong naturally wanted to put weapons there. This time, although the 500 black cavalry also brought firearms with them, they were very limited. This was especially true for ammunition, which was extremely lacking. And if they had enough ammunition, the 500 black cavalry would be enough to guard the small courtyard and prevent any enemy from advancing. It was dark. The 3 provincial armies sent food for the 500 black cavalry. Beta Persei brought Dao Xiao and Ba Daojiang to check carefully and did not find any problems. But for the sake of safety, they only sent a squad of 10 black cavalry to try first. After seeing that there were no adverse reactions after an hour of eating, everyone began to eat. Yang Qindong agreed with everyone's caution. Although he did not think that the 3 provincial armies would do anything because it would only prove the other party's stupidity, it was better to be safe than sorry. After the meal, the small courtyard became quiet. A total of 500 black cavalry, a total of 200 people were arranged to be on night watch. They were hidden in every corner of the 2 courtyards, showing the caution of the black cavalry. The black cavalry was not only strong in individual combat, but also had a good sense of obedience and loyalty. What was more, they were cautious. When they should be bold, they would charge forward. When they should be careful, they would be extremely cautious like an embroidered woman. It was late at night. The figure of the night watchman walked past the street outside the door and sounded the 3rd night watch. Not long after the night watchman walked past the street, hundreds of black shadows suddenly appeared from everywhere and began to gather outside the street. These black-clothed people were extremely familiar with the terrain of this street. They avoided the sentries of the 3 provincial armies one after another and arrived outside the small courtyard. Then they gathered into a flood. From afar there were about 150 people. Their footsteps were light, their movements nimble, their landings silent, and there was no wind when they moved. They were undoubtedly experts. As soon as they appeared outside the small courtyard, their footsteps did not stop for too long. Instead, they jumped over the wall and stood guard. They appeared to be in good order. Soon, the back door of the 3 courtyard was opened from the inside. A group of black-clothed people entered in a single file and quickly charged towards the 4 courtyard on the other side. Attack! Just as these black shadows did not encounter any obstacles along the way and arrived at the side door of the 4 courtyard, a loud roar suddenly sounded. Then there was the sound of flames spewing out. Bullets flew out and covered the bodies of those black-clothed people. The black-clothed people were completely unprepared for this sudden attack. Just this attack alone caused at least 100 corpses to fall. Less than a third of the black-clothed people retreated in panic. However, since they were already here, how could they possibly let them retreat? Unknowingly, a row of black knights and dragon guards had appeared behind them. They had 2 light machine guns and the rest were Type 95. Just like that, they swept across the area. When the bullets landed among the shadows, there were screams after screams. Kill them all. Leave no one alive. Yang Qindong's voice sounded in the dark night. Unknowingly, he was already standing in the small courtyard. Beta Persei and Dao Xiao were standing on either side of him. The gunshots did not seem to have any intention of stopping. In less than a minute, the last 50 black-clothed people had all fallen into a pool of blood. From the beginning to the end, they did not even have a chance to draw their swords. They did not even see the shadows of their opponents before they were all turned into corpses. Young master is amazing. Beta Persei and Dao Xiao looked at each other and sighed. Just an hour ago, Yang Qindong suddenly called them, including Ba Daojiang, and asked them to be prepared to face the enemy at any time. Sure enough, the enemy appeared. They were caught off guard and did not cause any losses to themselves. This was how Beta Persei and the others admired Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong was a human, not a god. Of course, he did not know if the enemy would appear or when they would appear. He only had an instinctive feeling that Zhu Huituan would not be idle on the first night. If things went wrong, he would launch a probing attack. That was why he called Beta Persei and the others to prepare. However, he took this opportunity to go to the empty house in the backyard. With his strength as a grandmaster, he did not attract anyone's attention. Then the place was filled with all kinds of weapons and ammunition taken out from the warehouse. After everything was done, Yang Qindong could finally breathe a sigh of relief. With the existence of these firearms, anyone who wanted to cause trouble for him would only be courting death. The gunshots in the courtyard quickly attracted the attention of General Wang Zhanjiang, who was in charge of security outside the courtyard. He rushed into the courtyard with a large number of soldiers from the 3 provinces. At this time, the torches had been lit and shone on the corpses. What's going on? What's going on? Wang Zhanjiang, who rushed into the courtyard, instinctively pulled out his sword. This action immediately attracted the aim of no less than 5 black muzzles. This really scared him. He felt as if his whole body could not move at this moment. Put down your guns, Beta Persei strode over and said loudly to the black cavalry. Then he looked at Wang Zhanjiang and said righteously, General Wang, these people are all assassins. They wanted to harm Bugnam of Gojoseon, but we found them and killed them all. But I don't know how so many people appeared here. What are your people doing outside? This. Wang Zhanjiang did not know how to answer. Chen Tian did not inform him of this probing operation because he did not want to complicate things. So General Wang, who was completely unaware, did not know how to answer. Looking at Wang Zhanjiang's stammering and flushed face, Yang Er shook his head. Without waiting for Wang Zhanjiang's answer, he said, All right, since you're here, I'll have to trouble you to transport these corpses out. After speaking, Beta Persei turned to leave. At this time, Ba Daojiang came forward and whispered, Second brother, we've used up 1/5 of our gunpowder in this battle. If this continues, I'm afraid. Let's go back and talk. Beta Persei glared at Ba Daojiang, then turned and strode away. And all this was seen by Wang Zhanjiang. At this moment, his heart trembled as if he had understood something. Because of Wang Zhanjiang's arrival, the assassins' corpses were quickly moved out by the 3 provinces' army. Then the general went straight to the 3 provinces' palace without stopping. Chen Tian did not go back to rest. He was waiting for news here. After seeing Wang Zhanjiang's arrival, he and Zhu Huiqiu listened to his report seriously. After hearing that the 150 skilled assassins were all dead and did not cause any casualties to the 5-star army, both Zhu Huiqiu and Chen Tian stopped talking. They did not expect this operation to be successful, but at least they could injure some of the black cavalry. But now, it seemed that they had underestimated their opponent's strength. My king Lord Qin, this general also heard some news. Wang Zhanjiang thought for a while and decided to tell them what he heard. Oh, what news? Zhu Huiqiu asked. Wang Zhanjiang wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He was obviously shocked by the black cavalry's killing methods. He quickly calmed himself down and said, This general heard that the black cavalry used up 1/5 of their gunpowder. What? Hearing this, Chen Tian exclaimed. He took a step forward and asked Wang Zhanjiang with his face almost touching. General Wang, what did you just say? Please repeat it. Wang Zhanjiang was shocked by Chen Tian's action, but he still repeated what he said just now. Ah! After confirming that he heard it clearly this time, Chen Tian laughed and turned to Zhu Huiqiu. He clasped his hands and said, Congratulations, my king. This time, we are 100% sure that we can take down Yang Qindong. Even if he is not alive, he is definitely dead. Ah, not bad, not bad. Zhu Huiqiu seemed to have thought of something and nodded excitedly. The black cavalry was powerful, but they only relied on their powerful firearms. Without the support of gunpowder, what was the difference between these firearms and firewood? Understood, continue to probe. At the crucial moment we can put on a show. As for Yang Qindong, we can just push all the blame to the Sheeping Palace. Through this test, Zhu Huichun had more confidence in his heart, and he immediately spoke of the next step of the plan. This also caused Chen Tian, who was standing at the side, to nod his head repeatedly. Then he said, Your Majesty is wise. That was an earth-shattering flattery. It was as if at this moment, they could already see Yang Qindong being heavily surrounded and at the end of his rope. Chapter 1564. In the courtyard. Beta Persei reported to Yang Qindong especially what Ba Daojiang said just now. Then he said with a puzzled look, Young master, why do we have to inform the enemy that we don't have enough ammunition? Yang Qindong smiled lightly when he heard this and said, If we don't tell the enemy, how can they jump over the wall? Young master has too many things to do, so I won't waste too much time here. The sooner they make a move, the better. Beta Persei showed an expression of understanding after hearing this, but then he said with a sad face, But young master, we really don't have much ammunition. Everyone is riding on war horses and their equipment is already very heavy. We really can't bring too much gunpowder. It's okay, the gunpowder has been sent over. It's in the row of houses in the backyard. It's enough for you to kill tens of thousands of people, haha. Yang Chendong was in a very good mood at this moment. He had done what he needed to do now. He was just waiting for the other party to lose their patience and finally come knocking on his door. Then he could take advantage of the situation and launch the final counterattack. He believed that this would not take too long. Beta Persei had already disappeared by this time. Needless to say, he went to the backyard to check on the firearms and ammunition. When he saw the house that was thousands of square meters full of all kinds of weapons and ammunition, his mouth opened so wide that he could easily stuff an egg into it. After a while, Beta Persei couldn't help but say to himself, "Who sent this? How did it get here? Why didn't the Black Cavalry notice it at all? Fortunately, it's an ally. If it was an enemy, wouldn't it be too scary?" Beta Persei, who had enough ammunition, was naturally not afraid. Thinking back to the time when the 2,000 Black Cavalry had enough ammunition, even the 100,000 Beiming Liaodong Iron Cavalry could be dealt with. Although they only had 500 people now, it would not be a problem for them to eliminate tens of thousands of soldiers from the 3 provinces. How would Zhu Huili know about this? After a discussion with Chen Tian and Wang Zhanjiang, he only needed to wait for the next night to arrive. He would then make his move and exhaust the enemy's ammunition until an opportunity presented itself. He would then go straight for the middle of the army and capture Yang Chendong alive. Just as Yang Chendong thought, Zhu Huichun would not wait for too long. He wanted to catch Yang Chendong too much. He wanted to prove himself too much. He wanted to become a true king or even an emperor. The night passed and the next morning the Black Cavalry began to change shifts. Those on duty went to sleep, while the Black Cavalry who had enough sleep got up and took over the defense work. However, before his opponent arrived, Dong Chuanfu was the first to come. He stood respectfully outside the small courtyard, and after announcing his name, he stood there obediently and waited to be received. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that every day felt like a year. Every day he and the other members of the diplomatic mission passed in fear. No one knew when the 3 provincial kings would be in a bad mood and suddenly surround them and kill them. Fortunately, no killing intent appeared, and they finally persevered until Yang Chendong arrived. Dong Chuanfu could be considered to have completed his mission, and before he left, he had to come and see the king. This was his duty as a subject. Yang Chendong slept well in the second half of the night, but Beta Persei was a little excited and had a pair of panda eyes. Ba Daojiang walked into the courtyard and reported that Dong Chuanfu had asked for an audience outside the door. After hearing this, Yang Chendong nodded and said, "Then let him in." After a while, Dong Chuanfu, who was dressed in a Chinese tunic suit, came in front of Yang Chendong. He then knelt down and greeted him, respectfully calling him Your Majesty and greeting him well. "Get up." Letting Dong Chuanfu kneel on the ground, Yang Chendong didn't stop him. He knew that these people who used to be officials in the Great Ming Dynasty attached great importance to etiquette. If he dared not to let him kneel, he would inevitably be nagged and his ears would suffer. "How is it? Have you gained anything during this time?" With a slight smile on his face, Yang Chendong said with a pleasant expression. Although these people have made inappropriate remarks, Yang Wu reported in the telegram that these people are still very honest and competent for the work in hand. It's just that their thinking is somewhat traditional. If it wasn't for the fact that he was upright, how could he have become a vice minister? How could Yang Chendong tolerate them until now? Of course, Dong Chuanfu was found by Yu Qian. Needless to say, people who can be recognized by this person are not worried about their standing. When asked what he had learned, Dong Chuanfu, who had just stood up, sighed and said, "Your Majesty, this king of the 3 provinces is really too hateful. Ever since we came here we have never seen him. Not only does he put on a high and mighty appearance, but he also frequently makes the soldiers guarding us make frightening movements. He is really hateful. It's also thanks to Your Majesty's wisdom that we can suppress him and make him obediently surrender to us." Even at this time, Dong Chuanfu was still kind enough to think that Yang Chendong's arrival was really to accept Zhu Huihua's surrender. Regarding this, Yang Chendong didn't mean to explain. He didn't want to show off his greatness in front of his officials, as if his appearance saved these people. Although this was the truth, but even without these people in the face of righteousness, Yang Chendong was skilled and bold and would still make this trip. He also didn't want to say that the reason why Zhu Huihua let Dong Chuanfu and the others go was because they were useless. And letting them go could also show his benevolence and make him famous. Well, this time when you go back, work hard. You also need to know that in this world, the so-called justice is just in the end, whose fist is bigger. Otherwise, the weak will not have any right to speak and receive any respect. If you have time, you can tell your colleagues about your experience. Perhaps a country can be ruled by law, by etiquette, and by virtue. But a country must be founded with one's fist. This is a principle that hasn't been repeated for thousands of years. Sometimes, killing people is also to save more people, understand? It was rare for Yang Chendong to say so much at once. Dong Chuanfu remembered it all in his heart and quickly bowed his head and said, "I will remember your Majesty's teachings." "Good, go back. Leave in the morning, there's no need to stay." After Yang Chendong gave Dong Chuanfu one last warning, he waved his hand, and Ba Daojiang walked up and led him away. Yang Chendong slowly closed his eyes and thought about the current situation. There were only 3 reasons why Zhu Huihua didn't kill Dong Chuanfu and the others. First, it was disdain. After all, with a big fish like him around, everyone else could be ignored. Second, it was to confuse him and make him feel that the other party was really unwell, which was why they didn't come to negotiate. Then, if he was careless, it would be time for the other party to bare his fangs. Third, it was to make a name for himself. However, that was because he could kill him. If he couldn't do that, then the third reason was useless. Fine, Zhu Huihua, continue acting. Let's see if you can swallow me this time, or if I can become Sun Wukong and wreak havoc in Princess Ironfan's stomach and win in the end. The day passed uneventfully. Only in the morning did Chen Tian come over. Other than asking Yang Chendong how he slept last night, he also reported that Dong Chuanfu and the others had left the city. At the same time, he also said that their king Zhu Huihua's health had improved a little, but it would take a few more days for him to fully recover. He asked Yang Chendong to be understanding and wait patiently. Who didn't know how to act? Yang Chendong reprimanded Chen Tian in front of him, saying that the killers that appeared last night had a lot to do with the lack of protection from the 3 provinces. Then he said that he was busy with official business and couldn't wait here for more than a few days. If Zhu Huichun still couldn't come to see him in 3 days at most, he would leave. At that time he would bring the steel cavalry. Hearing Yang Chendong give a deadline of 3 days, Chen Tian was happy, but he pretended to be serious and said, "Yes, please rest assured, Bugnam of Gojoseon. In 3 days, my king's health should be able to hold on until he comes to see you. As for what happened last night, they have already investigated. It was done by Shiping Wang's Mu family. It should be the Southern Ming court's intention." He also said that since the other side didn't succeed, they won't let it go. They might continue to attack, but he will tell the guards outside to strengthen their defenses. Is he trying to give me a heads up? Yang Chendong thought in his heart, but he didn't say anything. This was the game. There were all kinds of tricks and there was nothing to object to. If Yang Chendong didn't need to do this to obtain the righteous cause and take control of the 3 provinces, he wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. However, the 3 provinces were Han territory and there were Han people here. If he didn't want the people to suffer too much, it was inevitable that he had to play some tricks. Chen Tian left, but when he returned he reported the information to Zhu Huiyun. The two discussed that they had to use up all the firearms and ammunition brought by the Black Cavalry in 3 nights. If they couldn't do it in 3 nights, they would turn hostile on the 4th day. In short, they couldn't let Yang Chendong escape. Even if they couldn't capture him alive, they had to kill him and leave behind a corpse. Passively taking a beating wasn't Yang Chendong's personality. He was surrounded by Wang Zhanjiang's army in the small courtyard and couldn't get out, but he had a radio. He used the radio to broadcast what happened last night to the head of the security bureau, Yang San, who had arrived at Yunnan Manor earlier. Yes, this time Yang San was also ordered to rush to Yunnan Manor. His main task was to investigate which traitor colluded with the 3 provinces' kings and sold out Yang Xie and the 5-star army. In the past few years, Yang San's activities were mostly in the Baiming area. Although Yang Xie didn't have the intention to use force there were too many young masters' relatives in the capital of Baiming. Not to mention others, Yang Chendong's brothers and sisters were all here. Chapter 1565. Ever since Yang Chendong had left Baiming's capital and headed south, his relatives in the capital had been treated like an otherworldly existence. Even though the Baiming emperor and a few important officials loathed them, they didn't dare to do anything. This situation was very strange and complicated. Yang Chendong wouldn't be at ease if he sent someone else. Therefore, he handed the matter of the southern Ming to Yang Lu and the matter of the northern Ming to Yang San. Over the years, Yang San had done a very good job. Under the watchful eyes of others, the Yang clan's relatives hadn't been attacked by any external forces. But at the beginning of this year, Yang Chendong's eldest sister, Yang Fei, had passed away due to illness at the age of 59. In that era, living to 60 was already considered a long life. This was something that no one could resist. But because Yang Qindong was busy and couldn't personally go due to special circumstances, he left everything to Yang San. He took care of it. As soon as the funeral was over, Yang San received a new order. Without stopping, he rushed to the 3 provinces and secretly entered the southern Cloud Manor. With the capabilities of the Security Bureau, he naturally had a special way to enter the city without being discovered by Zhu Huichuan's spies. This order was passed down by Yang Qindong to Yang San, asking him to spread the news in the city. Last night, someone wanted to harm him and spread Qin Tian's words. Furthermore, he emphasized that he had to spread the news to the commoners and let them know that if anything happened to him here, the 5-star army would definitely be enraged and would flatten this place. At that time, the first ones to suffer would definitely be the commoners at the lowest level. This was why Yang Qindong was willing to be bait. How to guide the public opinion, how to make the public opinion work for him, how to use the public opinion to achieve his goals, and so on. As a person of the future, he was very clear about this. Don't underestimate the public opinion. If things were done well, it could hold up against hundreds of thousands of soldiers. After sending out the telegram, Yang San didn't disappoint. Not long after, rumors began to appear in Yunnan Manor, spreading to the restaurants and markets where people gathered. Some of the citizens had also heard about the gunshots that were heard in the city last night. At first, they didn't know what this meant, but after hearing those rumors, they suddenly realized that someone was trying to harm Bugnam of Gojoseon. As the rumors spread more and more, all kinds of unfavorable news began to spread among the people. After 4 hours of fermenting, the public opinion was boiling in the afternoon, and the news had spread to the extent that everyone in the streets and alleys knew about it. Have you heard? Last night, there were assassins who rushed into the courtyard where Bugnam of Gojoseon lived. Just the sound of gunfire alone has been ringing for a long time. Why haven't I heard about it? Everyone knows about it now. Hey, who do you think is so daring? Guns are so powerful, aren't we just going to die? Come on, what do you care about? Did you not consider what would happen if the assassins hurt Bugnam of Gojoseon? What would happen? This sentence attracted the attention of many people in the tea house. Think about it, if something happened to Bugnam of Gojoseon in our Yunnan Manor, wouldn't his brave subordinates seek revenge? If that's the case, who will be the unlucky one in the end? After about a few breaths, someone seemed to have reacted. If something happened to Bugnam of Gojoseon in our place, I'm afraid that the 5-star army will definitely trample our Yunnan Manor to avenge their king. Then won't we, the citizens, suffer? More than suffering, I'm afraid we won't be able to survive. Hiss. What followed was the sound of people inhaling cold air. This probably won't happen. We all know this, how can the 3 kings not know this? He will definitely send people to protect Bugnam of Gojoseon. There were still people in the crowd who were hoping for a fluke and said, "Protect Bugnam of Gojoseon? I'm afraid you still don't know. Ever since Bugnam of Gojoseon came to our Yunnan Manor yesterday, the 3 kings claimed to be sick and didn't come to see him. Who knows what he's thinking? Maybe those assassins were sent by the 3 kings." Silence, silence. How can you talk about these things? Maybe the 3 kings are really sick? Some people didn't agree with this point of view and took the initiative to explain for Zhu Huichun. Really sick? If that's the case, then it's good. I'm afraid that they have ulterior motives. Sai, if that's the case, then what should we do? Then, why don't we go and protect Bugnam of Gojoseon or persuade him to leave? Anyway, he can't be hurt here. Who said no? I thought that the 3 kings were clear. After Bugnam of Gojoseon came, we, the citizens, would be at peace. Who would have thought that things would turn out like this? Sai, isn't this going back on their word? Under the guidance of a few Yangtze's intelligence personnel, the public opinion began to develop in a direction that was favorable to Yang Qindong and unfavorable to Zhu Huichun. As more and more people discussed, the citizens in the tea house gathered around. Later, it was unknown who suggested it, but in the end, this was the result. First, everyone split up and went to the 3 kings' mansions to petition them. They asked the 3 kings to meet with Bugnam of Gojoseon to discuss the peace talks. Second, the rest of the people went to the courtyard where Bugnam of Gojoseon lived. Everyone was to protect him on their own. In short, before the matter was clarified, nothing could happen to Yang Qindong. Otherwise, they would be the ones in trouble. After the discussion came to a conclusion, the citizens in the tea house quickly dispersed. Everyone began to contact people. For matters that concerned the life and death of their own family, no one would ignore it and no one would be indifferent. The streets of Southern Cloud Manor became lively after this discussion was spread out. Many commoners began to gather. A portion of them headed straight for the three provincial princes' residences. A portion of them headed straight for the small courtyard where Yang Qindong lived with sticks and iron weapons. The appearance of one citizen naturally did not attract the attention of the three provinces' army. It was the same even if there were 10 or 100 of them. However, when the number of people increased to the point that there were thousands of them, even the army felt afraid. Is this a mass uprising? When he learned that there were more than 5,000 citizens with all kinds of weapons, coming in the direction of the courtyard, General Wang Zhanjiang, who was guarding there, was puzzled. He did not know why such a thing happened. Could it be that the citizens wanted to take Bugnam of Gojoseon's life? When this idea appeared, Wang Zhanjiang felt that it was an opportunity. If Yang Qindong died in the hands of the citizens, then it had nothing to do with him. He could also complete the task given by the king. Wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? At that moment, Wang Zhanjiang ordered the soldiers guarding outside not to put up much resistance. They only needed to put up a symbolic resistance to the commoners. If they really wanted to rush into the small courtyard, then they could do as they wished. Anyway, these citizens were spontaneous and not organized by him. If something really happened, it would have nothing to do with him. Without anyone stopping them, the citizens easily arrived outside the courtyard. Then, under Wang Zhanjiang's stupefied gaze, these people surrounded the 6 doors of the small courtyard and sat down on the ground. From the looks of it, it was clear that they were not going to leave. At this moment, Wang Zhanjiang could tell that these people were not here to cause trouble for Yang Qindong. They were clearly here to protect this person. When he thought that with the presence of these citizens, tonight's operation would not be able to proceed normally, cold sweat broke out on Wang Zhanjiang's forehead. Men chased these citizens out. Quickly chased them away. When the soldiers of the three provinces who were originally standing around and watching heard the general shout, they all walked forward reluctantly. However, how could it be so easy for 1,000 soldiers to chase away 5,000 citizens? The outside of the courtyard was very lively. The commotion quickly attracted the attention of the black cavalry in the courtyard. Commander Dao Xiao, who was in charge of the day shift, immediately sent people out to understand the situation. After knowing the general cause of the matter, he reported it to Yang Qindong in the main courtyard, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. The citizens want to help us guard the courtyard? This is a good thing. This proves that the young master has the support of the citizens. The straightforward Beta Persei was elated when he heard this and bared his teeth. Yang Qindong, who had closed the book in his hand, also had a warm smile on his face. He could not help but sigh in his heart. This was the power of the citizens. Although they usually did not show their strength when it came to their interests or even life and death, they would erupt with a powerful force. Wasn't the reason why the great Ming Dynasty was destroyed in history because of the various uprisings of the citizens? First, the country was in chaos, and this gave the slaves an opportunity to take advantage of it. At this moment he showed some interest. He wanted to see what these citizens would do. Outside the courtyard, the soldiers and the citizens were confronting each other. Because of the difference in numbers, the soldiers of the three provinces did not have any advantage. Although they all had standard swords in their hands, they did not dare to casually kill the citizens. What if they angered the citizens and caused a mutiny? What's more, the soldiers were originally made up of commoners, and some of them were originally from the Southern Cloud Manor. His friends and relatives were among these 5,000 people, so how could they bear to kill them? In the chaos, the situation was already out of control. Wang Zhanjiang had no choice but to retreat and go straight to the three provincial palaces to ask for reinforcements. At this time, the three provincial palaces were also not peaceful. Thousands of citizens were gathered outside, shouting loudly. They wanted the three provincial kings to see Bugnam of Gojoseon and discuss the peace talks together. Bugnam of Gojoseon is already here. Now is the time for us to show our sincerity. We can't go back on our words. That's right. A person must be honest. He came to our territory without worry. We can't treat Bugnam of Gojoseon like this. Willing to invite the three provincial kings to go to the peace talks. Willing to invite the three provincial kings to go to the peace talks. Chapter 1566. More and more voices rang out and finally they converged into one sentence. Outside the mansion, the shouts grew louder and louder. Inside the mansion, Zhu Huichio's expression was very ugly. He couldn't understand why the situation had suddenly changed. What had happened? Chen Tian had been urgently summoned from the backyard of the mansion. When he heard the shouts outside, he said nervously, "Your Majesty, this matter must be suppressed. We can't agree to the people's demands." Zhu Huiqiu rolled his eyes at Qin Tian. Isn't this nonsense? It wasn't easy to trick Yang Qindong into coming here. How could he be satisfied if he didn't teach him a lesson? That's enough, Qin Gongong. Let's talk about what we should do now. Okay. Qin Tian fell into deep thought. But as expected of Zhu Huiqiu's think tank, he quickly raised his head again. Your Majesty, we can only stall for time now. At the same time, we have to act quickly. Qin Tian took a step forward and reported his idea to Zhu Huiqiu in a low voice. Zhu Huiqiu kept nodding as he listened. Finally, he waved his arm and said, "That's right. Let's do it this way. But it's a pity. I'm afraid it will be difficult to capture Yang Qindong alive and use him for our own purposes. Your Majesty, don't worry. When the time is right, I will have a good talk with Bugnam of Gojoseon. I don't think anyone is willing to die. Maybe there's still a chance. I hope so. Qin Gongong, I'll leave this matter to you. Go ahead and do it." Zhu Huiqiu waved his hand and sighed. After watching Qin Tian leave, he thought for a moment and went straight to the backyard of the mansion. In the backyard, Emogue was sitting in front of the pond. He seemed to know that Zhu Huiqiu was coming. There were 2 teacups in front of him and the tea was still steaming. "King of the 3 provinces, please take a seat." Emogue modestly invited Zhu Huiqiu to take a seat in front of him. Zhu Huiyun admired Emogue's calmness very much. His originally restless heart seemed to have calmed down at this moment. "Mr. Mo, I'm actually here to ask for your advice. In your opinion, how do you think we should resolve the current situation?" Emogue wasn't surprised by Zhu Huichuan's answer. After a sigh, he said, "Your Highness, as I said before, my master's intention is to wait for Yang Qindong to enter the courtyard before making a move. After all, there are only 500 people. As long as we do our best and don't fear losses, the victory will be ours. To deal with Yang Qindong, either you don't make a move, or you have to go all out. You can't have the slightest bit of wishful thinking and you can't even try to probe him." Seeing that Mo Huiguan was about to go on, Zhu Huichen quickly interrupted him. "Mr. Mo, let's not talk about what happened before. Let's talk about what to do next. I really didn't expect this Bugnam of Gojoseon to know how to threaten the people's will. Now this prince has a headache. Haha, it doesn't matter. We just have to make a move later. I just don't know if your Highness is ready to make a move now." Emogue said the word yes in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. "Of course we have to make a move. I've already discussed it with Mr. Qin. We'll do our best tonight. We have to take down Bugnam of Gojoseon, dead or alive." Zhu Huichun told Emogue about Qin Tian's idea. "Good. Since your Highness has made up your mind, don't worry about it. If anything happens, my master won't just stand by and watch. My master has prepared a backup plan. Yang Qindong must die." Emogue's face was full of murderous intent as he said this. This was the final mission his master gave him. If he didn't complete it well, his head would roll. In comparison, he certainly hoped that Yang Qindong would die, not him. When Zhu Huichun heard Emogue say that he had a backup plan, he felt good. This was the result he wanted. Now that he had achieved his goal, he nodded with satisfaction. "Good. I'll have to trouble Mr. Mo. Of course, if you need my help in any way, just let me know." The change in public opinion made Zhu Huichuan's 3-day attack turn into a 1-day attack. He was going to see the results tonight. For this, Wang Zhanjiang received a large number of reinforcements. A total of 4,000 soldiers rushed out of the courtyard. 5,000 soldiers fought against 5,000 civilians and chased away the stick-wielding civilians. When the commoners saw so many soldiers from the 3 provinces outside the small courtyard, their anxious hearts relaxed. With so many soldiers protecting Bugnam of Gojoseon, their safety shouldn't be a problem. They scattered in all directions. However, when Yang Qindong, who was in the courtyard, learned about the situation outside, his expression became much more dignified. He had a feeling that it was time for the dagger to be revealed. "Beta Persei, take out all the weapons and ammunition of the Black Cavalry and equip them." "Young master, are they going to make a move?" Beta Persei asked cautiously. "Maybe, maybe not. But it's not wrong to be prepared. Go do it." Yang Qindong waved his hand, then returned to his desk and began to draft a telegram. Once Zhu Huichun turned hostile, he would have to send the main force of the 5-star army to the 3 provinces. At that time he would have the right to do so. This time the other party didn't want to give him face. Presumably, once the news spread, the civilians would understand his decision to send troops, and there would be less resistance. It had to be said that for the safety of the three provinces, Yang Qindong did a lot and was willing to take this risk. This was completely in line with his goal of bringing the Han people to the top of the world. 5,000 against 500, this was the first dish that Zhu Huichun prepared for Yang Qindong. If things didn't go well, he would continue to deploy troops. Speaking of which, in Yunnan Prefecture he had 50,000 troops stationed there. He didn't believe that he couldn't kill Yang Qindong with 100 times the force. In a courtyard 2 alleys away from Yang Qindong's courtyard, 200 strong warriors were sharpening their swords. If Zhu Huichun could see them, he would recognize that the leader was Mu Ong from the Mu family of the Shiping King. Mu Ong, the nephew of the current Shiping King, Mu Bin, was the bravest person in the younger generation of the Mu family. Even Mu Bin's eldest son Mu Tsong couldn't compare to him. It was because of his bravery that he was given the task of assassinating Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong's existence was a great threat to the great Ming dynasty's political power. It could be said that as long as this person didn't die, it was only a matter of time before he replaced the great Ming dynasty's political power. Because of this, after hearing that Yang Qindong had entered Yunnan Prefecture with only 500 black cavalry, Mu Ong was immediately sent out. The purpose was to complete the task of assassinating Bugnam of Gojoseon. This was a risky move, but when Mu Bin, the king of Shiping, found Mu Ong, he brought his 200 men of sacrifice to Yunnan Prefecture without saying a word and successfully went into hiding. As a member of the Mu family, they were very familiar with Yunnan Prefecture. These 200 men of sacrifice were deeply indebted to the Mu family, so they came with the intention of returning the favor. To put it bluntly, they didn't plan to return alive. The small courtyard was silent, showing the excellent quality of the men of sacrifice. In the corner, Mu Bin was talking in a low voice with the leader of the men of sacrifice. The general idea was that there was a new movement on Zhu Huiyun's side. It seemed that he was going to make a move on Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Qindong tonight. Well, keep an eye on them. It's fine if they succeed. If they don't succeed, it'll be our turn to attack. In short, Yang Qindong must die. Mu Ang's face was unusually firm, holding the idea of success or death. The Mu family was indebted to the Zhu family and guarded Nanjiang for the great Ming dynasty. Everything changed because of the appearance of Yang Qindong. Now, not only did they lose their foundation in Yunnan, but they were also hiding in a small place like Kelisai, not daring to show their faces. Gradually, the name of the Mu family was forgotten by the world. This was something that Mu Ong didn't want to face. Just when the Mu family was feeling helpless, they learned that Yang Qindong had entered Yunnan Prefecture to negotiate with Zhu Huiyun, the king of 3 provinces. They were like people who were groping in the dark suddenly seeing the sun, suddenly giving birth to new hope. In other words, if Yang Qindong died, the Mu family had to live. Otherwise they would die without a doubt. Once the king of 3 provinces was defeated by Yang Qindong, the Mu family would have no soil to live on. Even if they died, they would have no face to see their ancestors. For the sake of the entire Mu family, it was just sacrificing these 200 men of sacrifice in Muong. What was the big deal? Muong made up his mind at this moment. However, what he didn't know was that in a small courtyard in the southern Cloud Manor, there was a group of men in black who were also preparing to fight to the death. They were relatively short, but their murderous aura didn't diminish. They were faintly discernible in the darkness. Yang Qindong didn't know that there was more than one enemy, but he was definitely not afraid. In his goal of achieving the great Han people's revival, he was destined to walk on an unusual path, and was destined to be full of danger. Beta Persei had already taken out firearms and ammunition with Dao Xiao and Ba Daojiang and equipped themselves. Not only that, they also took out all the things that could be used and built several blockades. With Yang Qindong's courtyard as the center, they built an arch-shaped temporary trench. Although they couldn't exert their full combat power due to the limitations of the environment and tools, as long as the other party didn't have artillery, it would be difficult to break through their defense line. Tell the soldiers to put on all their equipment. They must protect their own safety. Young Master said that it's fine if the army of 3 provinces doesn't attack, but if they do, they will use all their strength. Our opponents are 10 times, 100 times, or even more enemies. Beta Persei faced a group of black cavalry squad captains and said this with a serious expression. Chapter 1567. Beta Persei couldn't understand why the young master didn't allow them to take the initiative to attack. The situation was obviously very dangerous, and Zhu Huihua's ambitions were completely exposed. What they should do now was to take advantage of the fact that it wasn't dark and suddenly kill their way out. This way they could catch the other party off guard. Coupled with the undercover intelligence agents in the city, the chances of them leaving the city would be greatly increased. In the eyes of Beta Persei and the other Black Cavalry, Yang Qindong's safety was naturally the first priority. In order to complete this mission, everyone was willing to sacrifice themselves. They really couldn't figure out why Yang Qindong still hadn't made such a decision. But they didn't know that Yang Qindong had his own reasons for doing so. He wanted to take this opportunity to find out who the traitor was. Ever since he found out about the traitor, Yang Qindong felt like he was sitting on a needle. The feeling that someone could harm him anytime and anywhere made him feel very uncomfortable. In order to solve this problem, Yang Qindong risked his life to come to Yunnan Manor. He didn't believe that the traitor would still hide and not make a move under such an opportunity. As long as the traitor made a move, Yang San might discover something. Once he discovered the traitor, it would be the time for the real acquisition. Only then would the risk be worth it. Taking advantage of this opportunity to let the traitor jump out and then catch them all in one fell swoop was another main purpose of Yang Qindong's trip. As for whether the Black Cavalry would be in danger by doing this, with the firearms and ammunition he took out from the warehouse, it shouldn't be too big of a problem even if there was a problem. In order to completely eliminate the hidden danger, this risk was worth taking. Once Zhu Huichio brazenly started to make a move, the nearby 5-star army would gather together. At that time, the 500 Black Cavalry Dragon Guards would only need to hold on for 3 days, and the main army would arrive. The danger would also be resolved. These 3 days were the opportunity for the traitor to make a move. He also believed that it would be difficult for the traitor to hold back. After all, it was such a good opportunity. If he didn't make a move, it would be hard to say whether there would be such a chance next time. Sitting in the main hall of the main room, Yang Qindong had already asked Wang Shan to send a telegram to Yang San, asking him to keep a close eye on every move of the 3 provinces, regardless of who they contacted. Or if someone contacted them on their own initiative, they had to follow this clue and investigate it thoroughly. In short, they had to take this opportunity to find the traitor. The Black Cavalry began to make various preparations, and the sky gradually darkened. Finally, the sky turned completely dark and the sound of the night watch rang out. About 10 miles into the night, there was finally some movement outside the courtyard. The sound of a large number of footsteps could be heard. Everyone get ready. Let's give them a taste of grenades first. The person in charge of the first line of defense was Ba Daojiang, the vice-captain of the Black Cavalry's 1st Battalion. Beta Persei had already informed him that 5 of the 6 gates in the 2 courtyards had been firmly nailed from the inside. In order to prevent the enemy from climbing over the walls, they had buried landmines on the ground of the walls to ensure that no matter how many enemies came, they would all die. This was the only gate in the 6 gates that could be entered at any time. Ba Daojiang was guarding this gate. There were already several light and heavy machine guns set up here, forming a powerful firepower net to ensure that no one could pass through the net and rush in. A full 4 days of dry food and water had also been prepared. As soon as the battle started, the telegraph office would send out a request for help. Then, 3 days later, the main force of the 5-star army would arrive outside Yunnan Mansion. At that time, the situation would be settled. Within these 3 days, Yang Qindong's safety would be completely handed over to the 500 Black Cavalry. Everyone was both excited and worried about this sacred mission. They were excited that such a great mission was handed over to them. After completing the mission, this would be the most exciting experience of their lives. They were worried that if the enemy rushed in and hurt the 6th young master, even if it was just a hair, they would not be able to atone for it even if they died 100 times. We must not let the 6th young master suffer even the slightest bit of harm. This was the common thought of the 500 Black Cavalry. In order to achieve this goal, everyone took out 100% of their spirit, loaded their guns and aimed at the enemy. The sound of footsteps was getting closer and closer. It seemed that the 3 provincial armies were gathering outside. This created a dark cloud over the people's heads. If it was an ordinary army, they would have been so nervous that they would be sweating profusely. They might even be trembling all over and unable to hold their weapons tightly. After all, they only had 500 people. The 3 provincial armies alone had more than 50,000 soldiers in Yunnan Mansion. This ratio of 1 to 100 sounded really scary. Even if they were holding firearms that were more advanced than this era, the enemy's advantage in numbers was still like a dark cloud. It was so oppressive that it made it hard for them to breathe. However, with 500 Black Cavalry they were much calmer. As veterans of hundreds of battles, as the Black Cavalry who had participated in 2,000 against 100,000 and defeated the enemy without suffering any injuries, they were only excited. In their eyes, the so-called 50,000 enemies were all military exploits. Time passed by minute. The footsteps outside were getting louder and louder. As the Black Cavalry who had rich combat experience, they could tell from the sound of the footsteps that there were at least 3,000 enemies, maybe even more. There were only about 100 soldiers who were guarding this door with Ba Daojiang. However, they were not afraid at all. This was because among the 100 soldiers, there were more than 10 light and heavy machine guns. This gave them a strong sense of confidence. Clang, 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 the sound of the door being knocked was finally heard. The wooden door that was only rigged with a few wooden wedges soon vibrated. At the same time, the soldiers of the 3 provincial armies shouted, "Brothers inside the door, open the door quickly. There are assassins here. We need to go in and search for the assassins." Ba Daojiang scoffed at this lame excuse. He held the grenade in his hand, ready to pull the pin at any time, waiting to throw it out. After a few shouts, the soldiers of the 3 provincial armies finally pushed the wooden door open. They did not expect the Black Cavalry to answer them or open the door. The shouts just now were just an excuse for them to show up. The moment the wooden door was pushed open, a black mass of figures appeared. Countless soldiers of the 3 provincial armies rushed in like a sluice gate. "Throw it." Ba Daojiang did not hesitate. After shouting, he threw the grenade in his hand forward. Along with it, hundreds of other grenades were thrown forward. Boom boom boom. Boom boom boom. The sound of explosions rose one after another in the dark night. Under the loud explosions, there was a series of screams and screams. Type 95 opened fire. As soon as the grenades exploded, Ba Daojiang gave the order. Then a series of shots were fired in the direction of the door. Some of the soldiers of the 3 provincial armies who were rushing forward or trying to climb over the wall cried out in pain. This was just the first round of attacks, and there were probably hundreds of casualties or serious injuries. Outside the other 5 doors, there was also a series of explosions. Needless to say, someone must have stepped on a landmine and caused an explosion. This was a sign that the enemy had launched an all-out attack. After a series of gunshots, the area in front of the wooden door became much quieter. The soldiers of the 3 provincial armies quickly retreated after leaving a trail of corpses on the ground. It was obvious that they were just testing the waters. The Black Cavalry was the best of the best. The soldiers of the 3 provincial armies did not expect to be able to break into the courtyard in a single charge. "Quick, this door is open. Everyone gather here." A thunderous voice came from outside the courtyard. Clearly, after the other courtyards were unable to be opened, this courtyard that was the only one that was opened attracted the attention of even more people. General Wang Zhanjiang, who was in charge of the attack outside the door, began to deploy his troops and rearrange the attack plan. The sturdiness of this courtyard was not bad. Even in the face of a few explosions, it did not collapse. It had to be said that the seriousness of the people in ancient times was much better than the shoddy construction of modern times. Originally, they were worried that the wall would collapse because of the explosion. If that happened without anything to rely on, the difficulty of defending would be several times greater. Now that he knew that the walls were fine, the commander of this battle, Yang Er, heaved a sigh of relief. "Very good, leave the rest to Ba Daojiang. We will continue to dig the tunnel. We must be quick, we don't have much time left." After speaking, Beta Persei did not care about the battle outside. He waved the military shovel and continued to rise to the ground. At this time, there was a huge pit nearly 2 meters deep on the ground, and it was still deepening. After about a quarter of an hour of rest, the soldiers of the 3 provincial armies outside the courtyard launched the second wave of attack. Compared to the last time, they had more people this time, and the momentum of the attack was more powerful. "Everyone, don't be afraid. They don't have much firearms and ammunition. As long as they don't have firearms, they can't be our opponents. Charge." Wang Zhanjiang stood outside and shouted, cheering the soldiers on. Under the general's shout, a large number of figures appeared in front of the wooden door and on the wall. They were all fierce, cheering themselves on as they rushed forward to face the flying bullets. Pop-papa, pop-papa. Gunshots rang out again, and one by one, the black figures fell on the wooden door or on the courtyard wall. The figures that were alive and kicking just now were now bloody corpses. With just one wave of attack, at least hundreds of soldiers from the 3 provincial armies died. In this regard, Wang Zhanjiang, as the commander, did not have the slightest hint of pain on his face. These were all ordinary soldiers. In the eyes of the general, their lives were as cheap as dogs. If they died, they died. As long as there was money and food, they could quickly raise a new army. Chapter 1568. Charge. Continue to charge. The enemy's firearms can't possibly have unlimited gunpowder. Charge. Charge. Wang Zhanjiang yelled at the top of his lungs as he commanded the soldiers to charge into the courtyard one after another. It was as if they would not stop until they reached their goal. The charging troops came one after another. Even though the number of corpses on the ground was increasing, it still could not stop them from charging forward. As the charging momentum became more and more ferocious, they finally relied on their advantage in numbers to charge into the courtyard. They were less than 80 feet away from the black cavalry. Machine gun team, get ready. Fire in one shot. Other than occasionally shooting with the 95 style, Ba Daojiang had been observing the changes in the battle situation. Seeing that the enemy's attacks were getting more and more ferocious, he could no longer control the situation by relying on the 95 style. Hence, he gave the order to the machine gun team. The so-called fire in one shot referred to the fact that they could only fire a clip of bullets. This way they could stabilize the situation and not waste bullets. The machine gun team members who were already itching for a fight could only watch helplessly when they saw their comrades killing the enemy to their heart's content. Now that they had finally received the order to open fire, how could they be courteous? All the light and heavy machine guns rang out, and the bullets rained down like rain. The soldiers of the 3 provinces who had barely escaped death fell to the ground one by one. Da-da-da. Da-da-da-da. Under the sound of the machine guns, not a single living enemy could be seen in the courtyard in less than 20 seconds. The advantage that the 3 provincial armies had gained with great difficulty was wiped out in an instant. The dense sound of machine guns also caused the 3 provincial troops who were preparing to continue their charge to slow down. Then Wang Zhanjiang yelled, "Stop charging! Stop charging!" They had no choice but to stop. Under such dense gunfire and the terrain that was less than 50 feet wide, the number of people sent out would be the same as the number of people who died. Calculate the casualties. Wang Zhanjiang yelled loudly. Then he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Just a moment ago, he was prepared to lead the charge in order to encourage the soldiers. After all, there were already people who had charged in. In his mind, as long as he could charge in front of the black cavalry, he would be able to utilize the advantage of cold weapons. At that time, with the advantage of superior numbers, he would be able to exhaust his opponents to death even if he had to exhaust them. However, a burst of concentrated gunfire made him think that it was a close call. At the same time, he also completely withdrew the idea of taking the lead to attack. That was a flintlock, and when it hit a person's body, a hole would appear and a person would die. Even if a civet turned around and had 9 lives, it would still die miserably in such a situation. Even so, if he had nothing better to do, why would he lead the charge? That was not a charge but a fight to the death. At the same time, Wang Zhanjiang couldn't figure it out. When the black cavalry entered the city, he didn't see them carrying any heavy firearms. So what was going on? Also, didn't the black cavalry have limited ammunition? But from the looks of it, how could it be limited at all? They didn't have the slightest intention of saving when fighting. He cursed in his heart. He didn't know who provided the information that the 5-star army didn't have enough ammunition and almost got him killed. He then waited for the battle damage statistics. The Kiliarchs and Centurions below played their roles and quickly reported the battle situation to him, the commander of the army. When the final statistics came out, even though Wang Zhanjiang was already prepared, he still couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. 3,200 people. From the beginning to the end, not even half an hour had passed, and 3,200 soldiers had died. Among them, there were 400 soldiers who died outside the other 5 courtyards. The number of soldiers who died at the courtyard gate in front of him reached 2,700. Looking at this shocking number, Wang Zhanjiang looked back in disbelief. Only then did he realize that the originally densely packed army had been reduced by a lot. Only a little more than a third of the original 5,000 people were left. Don't charge for now, wait for orders. Wang Zhanjiang quickly made the decision to stop the charge and report the battle results. After all, if he continued to charge, he was afraid that his less than 2,000 subordinates would only be feeding bullets to the enemy. If he didn't handle it well, the black cavalry would see through him. If they counterattacked, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to stop them even if he wanted to. He left a few confidants and ordered them to keep an eye on the 5-star army in the courtyard. No matter what, he couldn't let them suddenly go out. He then rode on his warhorse and went straight to the king's mansion. The sound of gunfire could be heard throughout the city. Zhu Huiqiu, who was in the king's mansion, was naturally no exception. At this moment he was pacing back and forth in the main hall of the 5 prefectures. Although he hadn't received the relevant battle report yet from the dense gunfire, he had a feeling that the situation wasn't very favorable. Wang Zhanjiang came and immediately stood in front of Zhu Huiqiu and reported the battle situation. Hearing this, the expression of the 3 provincial kings changed again and again. After a while, his face darkened. "You're saying that the Black Cavalry has enough ammunition and they don't have any intention of stopping shooting?" "Yes." Wang Zhanjiang lowered his head. After sensing the king's anger, he didn't even dare to raise his head. "How is this possible?" Zhu Huiqiu said in disbelief. After anxiously pacing back and forth a few steps, he asked loudly, "When they entered the city, didn't you all see it? Did they bring any carriages?" "No." Wang Zhanjiang lowered his head and answered honestly. Since they didn't bring any carriages with them, how much ammunition could they bring with them? How is it possible that they can't finish shooting? Could it be that the soldiers below are too afraid of death and can't charge properly? Zhu Huiqiu couldn't understand and wanted to put all the blame on the soldiers' morale. "No, Your Majesty, the soldiers are already putting their lives on the line. Out of the 5,000 soldiers, I have prepared a team of 500 soldiers. Once they are found to be cowardly and not daring to charge, they will be punished according to military law." Wang Zhanjiang naturally tried his best to explain. He didn't want to be punished because of this and be punished by the king. Zhu Huiqiu still trusted Wang Zhanjiang. Otherwise, he wouldn't have entrusted him with such an important task. However, it was because of this that he couldn't figure out the reason. Now that Wang Zhanjiang was standing in front of him, he suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart and asked, "General Wang, why are you here?" "Your Majesty, I'm here to ask for reinforcements. I only have less than 2,000 soldiers. The 500 Black Cavalry should be unharmed. Under such circumstances, we don't have the ability to launch an attack, so..." "Approved. Take this King's Tiger tally and I'll give you 10,000 soldiers. General Wang, everything depends on you. Capture Yang Qindong alive and you will be the greatest contributor. Do you understand?" Zhu Huiqiu didn't wait for Wang Zhanjiang to finish speaking and nodded in agreement. In order to capture Yang Qindong alive, it would be worth it even if he had to use all 50,000 soldiers in the city. Hearing that there were 10,000 reinforcements, Wang Zhanjiang was naturally overjoyed. He immediately said with a solemn expression, "Thank you for your support, Your Majesty." "Don't worry, Your Majesty. With these 10,000 soldiers, I'm 80% more confident that we can capture Yang Qindong alive. Then this prince will wait for the good news from General Wang." "All right. Remember, you must stop the attack after daybreak." Zhu Huiqiu reminded him. The situation in the city wasn't very stable. When they attacked in the dark, the civilians couldn't see what was going on. They could only be suspicious, which was easy to deal with. However, once they attacked in the day, who knew what the civilians would do? The situation hadn't reached the most critical point yet, so there was no need to take the risk of attacking in the day. Wang Zhanjiang quickly nodded in agreement. He naturally understood this logic. During the day, he was the one who had led the soldiers to persuade the 5,000 civilians to return. How could he not know that if they attacked in the day and the civilians reacted, wouldn't the situation become even more chaotic? Wang Zhanjiang took the Tiger Troop talisman and left. 2 hours later, at midnight, he brought 10,000 soldiers to the courtyard. With the arrival of so many soldiers, the streets near the courtyard were quickly filled with soldiers. With so many reinforcements in hand, Wang Zhanjiang's confidence was greatly boosted. With a wave of his hand, he sent out 2,000 soldiers and once again launched a fierce attack on the courtyard. Gunshots sounded once again from sporadic to concentrated, indicating the intensity of the battle. A few hundred steps away in the courtyard, Yang Qindong wasn't sleeping. Instead, he stood in the courtyard and looked up at the bright moon hanging high in the sky. It was the 14th day of the lunar calendar. The moon in the sky was very bright, but Yang Qindong's heart was a little heavy. The moment Zhu Huiqiu began to turn hostile, Wang Shan had already sent a message to the main force of the 5-star army waiting in Langsun. Presumably they had already set off. A total of more than 200,000 soldiers should have already entered the 3 provinces. With the speed of the 1st Cavalry Army and the new army's cavalry, they should be able to reach Yunnan Manor in 3 days. At that time there would be a lot of fighting and killing. When he thought about how many Han people would die in this battle, Yang Qindong's mood was not good. The reason why Yang Qindong had conquered the surrounding areas of the Great Ming Dynasty was because he wanted to take over this place with the smallest price. After all, the people who had lived here for generations were all Han people. The death of any one of them would be a loss to the Han people. If he wanted to bring the Han people to the peak of the world, he needed to have a certain proportion of Han people. Only then would he be considered the king of the world. Originally, he thought that after conquering the surrounding areas and showing enough strength, the Great Ming Dynasty would be afraid of him. At that time he would only need to pay a small price to peacefully take over this place, allowing more Han people to live better lives and obtain the greatest respect. Chapter 1569. However, he did not expect the Great Ming Dynasty to be so courageous. It could also be said that the two emperors of the Great Ming Dynasty were people who would not shed tears until they saw the coffin. They were not frightened by the strength of the five-star army and even wanted to struggle. Since that was the case, Yang Qindong would not go easy on them. Taking care of the three provincial kings first was to make an example out of them. No matter what, Zhu Huiqiu was still a descendant of the Zhu family. Although he killed his brother, it did not change the fact that he was a member of the Zhu family. Yang Qindong only hoped that after taking care of Zhu Huiqiu with an iron fist, Zhu Qizhen and Zhu Qiyu could see the difference between them and finally surrender peacefully. Looking at the bright moon, Yang Qindong stood with his hands behind his back. His whole person was enveloped by the moon. The three provincial armies' attack was still ongoing. They had the idea of using manpower to consume firearms and ammunition. Wave after wave of attacks did not stop. Ba Daojiang's team had already been replaced. After repelling 4 waves of enemy attacks, the soldiers were very tired. Firing guns for a long time was also a physical activity. It was normal for their arms to be numb and their hands to be weak. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Dao Xiao brought another 100 black cavalry to replace them. When dawn broke, the attack of the three provincial armies finally came to an end. The entire courtyard was filled with corpses, and there was even a tall pile of corpses. The stench was so strong that it could be smelled from miles away. It was really nauseating. Outside the courtyard, Wang Zhanjiang was pinching his nose as he ordered the soldiers to clean up the battlefield. Below the courtyard wall, countless corpses were piled up. They were all the soldiers of the three provincial armies who had died last night. Looking at the corpses, Wang Zhanjiang's face was bitter. His legs were a little numb. In just one night, out of the 15,000 soldiers from the 3 provinces, more than 12,000 of them had died. This was because he had intentionally slowed down his attack speed in the later stages of the battle. Otherwise, he was afraid that not a single one of the remaining 2,000 or so people would have survived. 15,000 against 500. With a ratio of 30 to 1, Wang Zhanjiang's side actually lost 5/6 of their soldiers. Not to mention that Wang Zhanjiang had never fought such a war before, he had never even heard of it. He did not know how to face Zhu Huiqian and explain to the king. Clean up the battlefield. Make sure to clean up the corpses. At the same time, stay far away from the courtyard. Give the enemy enough time to clean up the battlefield. After giving this order to the soldiers below, Wang Zhanjiang urged his horse to head towards the 3 provinces. Not long after Wang Zhanjiang left, a raging fire also ignited in the small courtyard. The number of soldiers in the black cavalry was limited. Naturally, they could not bury all the enemy corpses that had charged into their ranks. Considering that the weather was starting to heat up, they were afraid that the corpses would attract a plague. After reporting to Yang Qindong, the soldiers used a large fire to solve the problem. They burned all the enemy corpses with cremation. The smell of the burning corpses was quite unpleasant. When a breeze blew, the air in the entire southern cloud manor changed. Therefore, no matter whether it was near or far from the small courtyard, the people in the city all knew that someone had attacked the small courtyard where Bugnam of Gojoseon lived last night. Immediately, for their own safety, many people walked onto the streets and asked for help from the 3 provinces. Zhu Huiqian had expected the people's actions. In the morning he sent another general, Kai Wenju, to lead 5,000 soldiers to tightly seal off the main streets near the 3 provinces to prevent anyone from disturbing him. As for himself, he summoned Qin Tian, Meng Neng, Wu Yingtu, Mo Gui, and General Wang Zhanjiang who had just arrived to report. His right-hand men all arrived. The servants of the manor served tea and snacks. Everyone sat together to discuss the next step. Just as everyone's attention was on Wang Zhanjiang's report, the servants left one by one. One of the stewards first went to the servants' room to say goodbye, saying that he was going out to buy some things. Then he walked out of the manor openly. This steward's name was Zhu Changjiu. He had been with Zhu Huichen for more than 10 years. He was definitely an old man. This could be seen from the fact that he was given the surname Zhu. He also enjoyed a certain amount of power in the manor. For someone like this, his every move would not be suspected. However, this Zhu Changjiu had actually been bribed by Yang San. Yes, bribed. In order to get in touch with this person, the intelligence department spent a lot of effort. Yang San specially appointed a group of 7 people to get in touch with this person and related matters. For the sake of confidentiality, this group of 7 people was directly led by Yang San. In the entire Yangxia, other than Yang San, only Yang Qindong knew about this matter. However, he only knew about the existence of this group. As for who the specific members were and who they were in contact with, Yang Qindong did not know. This operation could be said to have reached the highest level of security in order to prevent information from leaking out. In the situation of knowing that there was a traitor, but not knowing who it was, Yang Qindong could not completely trust anyone. It was such a small group that did a lot of work for Zhu Changjiu. They investigated everything related to this person's life. It was not easy to find out that before this person came to Zhu Huichen, he had a sister who was 3 years younger than him. At that time, because the family was hit by a flood, the two were separated during the escape. There was no news for a long time. When this news was seen by Bureau Chief Yang San, he felt that there was a lot to be done. At that moment, he put in a lot of effort and mobilized a lot of manpower and material resources to investigate this matter. His hard work paid off and he really did manage to find out. Coincidentally, this woman was still alive, and she even came to Crimson City by accident. Now she was already married and she was a middle-level leader in the textile factory. After hearing this news, Yang San was overjoyed. He brought all the information and paintings about this woman, which was Wang Ling, to Yunnan Manor. Under the arrangement of the 7 small secret group, he met with Zhu Changjiu, this person whose original name should be Wang Chang. When Zhu Changjiu was blocked by Yang San in an alley, he instinctively wanted to shout. Based on his familiarity with the surrounding environment, he knew that there was a street 30 steps behind him. There must be soldiers patrolling on the street. His shout was likely to attract their attention. Just when Zhu Changjiu wanted to shout, Yang San handed over the paintings in his hand. There were a total of 4 paintings. One of them was Wang Ling's current appearance, another was a painting of his parents together in his memory, another was a painting of her and her brother, who was Zhu Changjiu, playing by the river in front of the courtyard when they were young, and the last one was a painting of Zhu Changjiu before they separated. Wang Ling was now a middle-level leader in the textile factory. Her husband's family was an ordinary leader in the city lord's residence. She also gave birth to 3 cute children and they were all studying in Yangxia's school. It could be said that she had received a lot of favors from Yang Qindong. Now that there was something that needed her help, she would do her best to help. When the 4 paintings appeared in front of Zhu Changjiu, the door of his dusty memory was opened. For a moment he shut his mouth. Just like this, Zhu Changjiu, who didn't resist, had a long chat with Yang San in a secret and safe place. When he found out that his sister was living well and had given birth to 2 little nephews and a niece for him, Zhu Changjiu cried tears of joy. All these years, it wasn't that he didn't think of looking for his sister. This matter had even alarmed Zhu Huiyun. He had sent people to look for her, but there had been no news. Over time, everyone thought that this woman must have died and was no longer in this world. But happiness came so suddenly. Tell me, what do you need me to do? Zhu Changjiu was also a smart person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been recognized by Zhu Huiyun. He looked at Yang San and asked in a deep voice. Outsiders didn't know what the 2 of them talked about. Anyway, after Zhu Changjiu left the house, he became Yang San's spy. His main task was to find out what other forces were secretly in contact with Zhu Huiyun other than the subordinates of the 3 provincial kings. Regarding this matter, Zhu Changjiu felt somewhat guilty. After all, Zhu Huiyun had treated him well. But when he thought of Yang San's promise that not only could his sister live a better life in Chichen City, but after the matter in Yunnan, he could also go to Chichen City to reunite with his sister. In the end, his emotions won over his rationality. Moreover, he only wanted to find that mysterious person, not to do anything to Zhu Huiyun. After thinking this through, Zhu Changjiu accepted this task. Today he left the mansion to report to Yang San. This was the first time he saw Mo Gue in the main hall. Judging from everyone's reaction, this should be the person Yang San was talking about. In the past, Mo Gue had been hiding in the 3 provincial kings' mansions. Because he lived in a place where outsiders couldn't get close, Zhu Changjiu didn't know. Yang San spent a lot of effort but still couldn't get any news. But now, perhaps because Yang Qindong was surrounded in the courtyard, everyone thought that he couldn't escape. So, they didn't hide Mo Gue and let him come out to meet everyone. Even so, if it weren't for the spies in the king's mansion, it would be impossible to find out about this person's appearance. In the king's mansion, Zhu Huiyun didn't know that Mo Gue had been exposed. He was listening to Wang Zhanjiang's report of last night's battle. When they heard that after a night of fighting, after launching more than 10 attacks and losing more than 12,000 men, they still couldn't break through the defense line set up by the Black Cavalry Dragon Guards, everyone present fell silent. Obviously, the reality was different from what they had expected. The Black Cavalry Dragon Guards were not as limited as they had imagined. On the contrary, they should have had plenty of gunpowder. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.